Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of The Big Boys Table. This is episode 63, and today I'm going to be talking with Mesk about the custom content curse, is what I'm calling it anyway. We can go through a little bit of the history. Obviously, this is a big part of both of our lives, but I feel like now I've been increasingly made more annoyed by how other people, both in the industry and in the consumer base of various titles, have been framing custom content. And I have an old video on the channel called Modders Are Not Saviors, which is going to basically serve as a lot of the initial fodder for our discussion, I think. But essentially, the point that I seem to be reading, and I'm going to do this in a... Hopefully I'm not poisoning the well or whatever and constructing a straw man when I try to provide people's ideas or their own perspectives or whatever on custom content. But the people who annoy me are basically alleging that custom content is really important. And there's like all these narratives about how, hey, this is required. And if you don't have custom content, if you don't have like a map editor and mod support and all this other stuff, then your game's just not going to succeed and it's not going to go anywhere. And also, like it's not just because, this allows you to extend the lifespan of your game by having other people make content, community content throughout the years or whatever. And, like there's obviously elements of truth to all of that. But the idea that it's also a gateway into game development, because of course, what's the difference between a modder and a game developer? And boy, have we both gone our own journeys on that one. So we'll get to those narratives towards the end, but laying it all on the ground initially here as like, again, the initial fodder for what we're talking about. I kind of want to start by taking us back a little bit to what custom content used to be before we got into this cursed land. And so I guess I'll ask you a little bit about, I guess, to define custom content, what it means to you and what it meant to you back in the days of, pre-Warcraft 3, as I'm calling it in our show notes here, before DotA overtook Warcraft 3, right? All the stuff way back when it was just, maps in Brood War, and then people were actually making mods and actually trying to do stuff and push the envelope. And obviously you go further back than that, and alongside that, there's all the stuff for the Doom clones and the various games there. So yeah, how would you describe custom content, what it used to be back in like the late 90s and early 2000s?
Well, first off the bat, the first thing I think of is the most successful games had no support.
Yeah,
like that's a constant. Is generally speaking, when a developer had their own editor and stuff like that, it was for the worse. When a developer got involved, it was always for the worse. And I mean, that trend just continued to become more and more profound as time went on. But early on, like Diablo 2, for example, that's not really a game you think is very modding heavy, right? But it was very modding heavy, and even to this day, still has a lot of people doing very large scale work for it. And that, obviously, no editor. The engine is quite a disaster, much worse than StarCraft. You guys have it easy with StarCraft.
Yeah.
Diablo 2 is much worse, especially the expansion. And that didn't matter. People made their own map editors. People made their own ways to process the graphics. There's 1,001 different Excel editors. There's tools to deal with specialized formats. People with the backgrounds and the skills took up the challenge because they wanted to get involved with it. And that's kind of what modding really was about, was people wanted to do stuff so they learned the skills to do them. Whereas today, modding is very sanitized today. I like to think of today as the comparison between Counter-Strike Go and then Counter-Strike Source in 1.6. Where in Counter-Strike Go, you can, or at least you used to be able to put in custom models and stuff like that. It's just much harder. And I think the server enforcement and stuff like that's a lot more strict. And now people sell their recolors and their hue shifts for money, and that's just insane. And that's what draws people to it, is the fact they can sell their recolors. So the quality of work is lower, and the only people that are attracted to are people who are interested in making money.
Yep.
And that shift didn't begin with Counter-Strike Go. Obviously, that was a demon in the gestation for many years. But that really is like the poster child for the evolution of what was to what is. And what was is people didn't give a shit about money. Money was never a part of it. It was people who wanted to do it. So the quality of work was always higher. The projects were much larger, more involved. There was more community around the projects because you typically had more people discussing low-level stuff and trying to help each other, as opposed to today where, their challenges to each other is financial survival. So, things are very isolated. I mean, just look at Skyrim. All of Bethesda's communities are an absolute disaster for any kind of collaboration or collaborative work, even from the consumer end. And it's ridiculous. And things were never like that back then. I mean, things are more closed and tightly knit in many cases too, but getting into it, getting involved was something people wanted, something people encouraged. And it was just, as a result, higher quality content and people who valued quality. It was much more of a meritocracy than it is today, where today it's just, people just want to make a quick buck, and that's all they care about. That's all they've cared about for a long time. You got people, anytime you go to any given mod today, the second you see a Patreon link or something like that, you can just close the tab and go somewhere else because you're dealing with garbage. Universally. It is just literally someone saying, we don't give a shit about custom content. We just want money. And as a result, the kind of people that are attracted to the custom content scene are also different. Is the kind of people who are consumers, who are about instant gratification, who breathe through their mouth. Literal NPCs is what I would call them, because they pay money for something that doesn't deserve any money for, generally for a product they've already paid for on top of it. And it makes no lick of sense, and they're not paying for quality. They're paying to be a part of something. They're paying for their identity effectively. Whereas back in when modding was really modding, identity was done through accomplishment. You weren't somebody unless you made something. And I joined like StarCraft when it was in its last year. That was like 2000, 2001. Now, I'd been making custom content for StarCraft before then, mostly maps. It was when I got into AI editing and first brush shoulders with Camelot Systems, which was asking me how to replace a melee AI and get out of mapping. And that took me down that road, and I more or less, joined like the CC community like a year or two after, something like that. By then, I was already in the down spiral. People were no longer making really like campaigns or anything anymore, except for a few people behind the works who then released like the incomplete stuff like the Gallantry, and then like Dominion War, and then there was of course the people I mentioned before, a lot of people who had aspirations to do this or that, like Kirkanic and stuff, but never actually did. With Half-Life 2 being the real attraction to a lot of those people because of the Source engine being something that they viewed as like a gateway to get into game design. And much like, I had to laugh because it was just like, it was the writing on the wall from the day one that mods and games are entirely unrelated. Yeah. They are completely unrelated. And you can mod for 20, 30 years. It does not prepare you at all for actual game design, period. It doesn't prepare you for game development at all. And these people would face that reality one after the other, and one after the other, it would kill their involvement in the scene and everything. And they would all just drift away, every single last one of them, because they realized, wait a second, I can't just go into DAT or Arsenal at the time and change a few numbers and suddenly have a game. I actually have to know what I'm doing. I actually have to make stuff, and that was too much for them. So modding was its own filter, because people without aspirations, people without the drive to do what was necessary, to learn what was necessary through any means, did not create things. And so they basically didn't exist. As a result, you did have the lower, like the peasantry that would say, oh, the developer should include the editor, does everything for you. But, this is amongst a community of people in pretty much any game you go to where they just built their own tools. And the developer, like Blizzard invented the modern DMCA. They invented the whole process of weaponizing these copyright things to destroy people making content. And BNED was, I believe, the first one to go, but the Infoceptor, StarCraft to Warcraft conversion was one of the other initial ones. And I believe they'd gone after several others as well. Anything they viewed as competition was fair game for them. And you always held the knowledge that, what you're doing is against You know, terms as a service. You're taking their data, you're modifying it, usually yanking stuff out of other games or whatever whenever you could. You're modifying the code and stuff like that. With StarCraft, it's very viable to change I believe you can change the cloak overlay, and you can change the unit sprites and stuff like that, and that works on Battle.net, and it probably works on iCup and everything else because it's all client-side. And I discovered that very early in. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff like that. Like, Final Fantasy 14 is a big one today with this. It has no anti-cheat whatsoever. So there's a lot of people that run really major texture and model modifications to that. There's a lot of people that scrape data out of it much more aggressively than World of Warcraft and other... World of Warcraft has had this constant battle against, like, decursive and other add-ons that kind of automate portions of the game.
Gee, I wonder why.
14, that's what's really rampant.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of people do this, and they, you know, it's always in a knowledge that at any point the developer can just crack down on this and just nuke it off the internet or ban you or whatever. And obviously with mods, you always just kind of walk that line. So it's always kind of like under the low. And that in itself made modding very isolated as well. Like, the only people who went out of their way to get into mods are people who are actually genuinely interested. So the user engagement was much higher. The user retention was much higher.
Yes.
You didn't have as many people showing up just for like a day or two, like, oh, this is neat. Because you had to put in some effort to even find the scene to begin with. So just the quality of the work and the quality of people was higher. You know, I mean, you can argue about the results of it, like Fungus Craft and its perspective graphics, or, you know, Aeon of the Hawk, or Flame Knives, or whatever, or, you know, Legacy of the Confederation. You can certainly argue about the actual quality of the end product. But the fact is that all those end products are still of a substantially greater time investment and overall quality than pretty much all modern work for the vast majority of games. Especially anything like, say, StarCraft 2. StarCraft 2 doesn't really have any custom content at all. And Warcraft 3 is just a fucking colossal cesspool. And one of the big differences is, of course, the kind of people that are drawn to the scene, like the culture, if you will, that form the scene, and then what people expected out of the scene as a result. And when you lower the bar of entry, you lower the bar of quality that comes out of it as a result. There's most certainly, you know, a middle ground that you can reach where something can be easy enough to get into, but it shouldn't be so easy that literally anybody can do anything without any effort and without any obligation to effort. And, you know, you can make so many different, like, I mean, we had a long discussion in your chat a while ago that kind of like bleeds into that, which is what constitutes as a tool and what constitutes as automation, and what line do you draw where you start eroding the creative process by making stuff too easy to get into. And that's something that I think is really hard to like cement in paper. But I think the turning point is when the developer says, here's all the tools to do everything for you, but those tools aren't actually any good. Like, say the case with StarCraft 2. StarCraft 2 is really great for this because there was a lot of tool developers when StarCraft 2 was announced. And they all jumped ship when they saw the Galaxy editor because they thought, oh, the Galaxy editor does everything. So why would we ever need to make tools for it? Yeah. And then they'd lost interest and left the game. They had no interest anymore. There was nothing in it for them as creative individuals because they weren't interested. This is the kind of crowd that wasn't interested in making projects. They were interested in making tools for whatever reason. You know, who knows why. But they didn't because they thought the editor did all of it for them. Well, it turns out the editor doesn't. It turns out they didn't even have a functional 3ds Max exporter out in the wild until 2014, 4 years after the game came out, and everybody had long left to another greener, much greener pasture. And to this day, the editor still can't do basic functions without spending up to minutes at a time sitting there, refreshing its interface, fragmenting your hard drive, mining bitcoins, whatever it does to just be so ungodly slow. And then, of course, there's like the fundamentals, like the layout is incredibly frustrating and incredibly awful to use. One of Blizzard's biggest fanboys made a statement way back in StarCraft 2's lifespan that really struck a chord with me, that even these kinds of people were saying these things. And he said, StarCraft 2 hands everything to you in such a way that makes it completely uninteresting to make custom content for. And that's something you could really spend a long time picking apart, is the very, like, the workflow, the process of doing content, and how, because that's something you have to enjoy. Yeah. That's something you have to actually get into. And of course, having the investment of using your own tools or being associated with the developers and their tools and having access to that kind of stuff puts, more of your personal investment into that, as opposed to working with some nameless developer who is never going to update anything. But when you think about back to like Diablo 2, mapping was interesting. That was a user-made tool. It's very, very basic, a little finicky, and Diablo 2 was never made to do any of this kind of stuff with. And I ran into a lot of hard code issues, but making maps for Diablo 2 was interesting. That I made a lot of them. And I can't think, like, all the way up until Unreal, where mapping has really been that interesting to me. Like, StarCraft 2 was just, like, going through the doodad list it's such a slog to find anything in it. And I think, like, another big difference you can make about, way back then is that the tools were made for developers as opposed to being made for marketers. Modern stuff like the StarCraft 2 editor, they're there to fill a bullet point. They're there for the developer to say, hey, look, we support modders. When every modder knows that's not reality. But the people on these show websites like Reddit or YouTube, they don't know the difference because they don't make content and they've never made content and they're not going to. But the developer says the editor supports modders, so why would they think anything else? It's there for show. It's there as a showpiece, as an ornament. It's like your trophy wife that's like 800 pounds. Well, back then, none of these tools were for show. You didn't even know these tools were there unless you got involved in the scene. There's a lot of differences just in the presentation of information, tools, and then what you're using to work with before you even get into the actual projects.
One of the main things that sticks out to me about when you're calling back to the older days where there wasn't official tools for a lot of this stuff and it had to be made whole cloth, like in Brood War, which is a really like mature game in terms of how long it's existed, in terms of its modding scene and the documentation therein. And we actually talked about modding tutorials and other documentation in a previous episode. And I talked about how, like, well, why the fuck would you even bother trying to keep it up to date or whatever? Because like most people are going to halfway follow it and then not ever do anything with the knowledge that you're trying to do. It's not really worth you investing your time into them. So there's like echoes of that here, and I'll unpack that a little bit more later on. But the fact is, the game has been out for so long that most people think that there actually were tools. Like it's just like a default, you know what I mean? Like oh yeah, of course there are tools, but they're not developer written, right? Like Brood War doesn't have developer tools. It has Star Edit, which doesn't even work, and they also fucking deprecated it because with the remaster, it's not even officially distributed anymore. Or supported or anything. So they actually tell you to go use SEM Draft 2, but of course they don't distribute it with the game. So whatever. So that's like the editor itself that you use to make maps is now like, which by the way was just like, it's just one of those things where it's like so many layers of this with Brood War specifically are funny to me because you'll get, people who are like, maybe they kind of remember Star Edit before or whatever. Now they can't find it. They just assume that you can't make maps anymore or whatever, because like, it's not like there's this big post somewhere that says, hey, check out SEM Draft 2. It's just, in some obscure Blizzard forum post from like 2019, there's a developer saying SEM Draft 2 is a great tool and we're not just going to bother with Star Edit anymore. So, there's actually now, as far as Brood War is concerned, for most people who are going to go download like the latest build of it or whatever, there is no editor that comes with the game from the developers. And when you think about it that way, it's actually quite shocking that, people still think of Brood War as like, of course it has all these tools, but they're all made by people who needed to make the tools in order for it to work.
And most of the tools for the first 3 quarters of Brood War's lifespan were fucking terrible to work with because they were either horrendously unstable and corrupted everything they touched, or they just corrupted everything they touched.
Well, it's a bit more than that because it's not just those tools. Like SEM Draft 2 will still sometimes kill your map.
Oh, wonderful.
Very rarely now by comparison, but especially with modding involved. So like, for example, there was a point where I changed like doodad placeability and that just corrupted a map. You had to like undo that change in the editor MPQ, go in, delete that doodad, repaste that doodad, clean up the extra tile that was removed, and then you could open the map in the new one. So,
I mean, at least you could reverse it. With Arsenal 3, if you just open images stat and saved it, it was corrupted for good.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It would distort the game and crash it at random. So yeah, you lived and died by your community. It had its advantages. It definitely had its disadvantages.
Right. And so that's the kind of thing, though, is like, despite the fact that it has its disadvantages of like, okay, sometimes it's not stable or whatever, the advantage is the expectation is there that you're going to do, you know, XYZ thing to make the game, like make the mod that you wanted to make the change you wanted to make. And sometimes you needed tools to be developed in order for you to even do that. Like, after you were referenced like Eon of the Hawk and Flame Knives, and people who've followed my playthroughs on the channel or whatever are going to know that like those projects are fucking terrible in terms of their objective quality. But I will actually agree with Mesk that like as a complete picture, they changed way more than most projects. Those were the last projects. It was that. And then, like, there was a very small amount of changes in a campaign called the Critter campaign that's so small that I don't even know if it's worth bringing up. But I will say for completeness, between, if you exclude that one, it was Eon of the Hawk and Flame Knives were the last large project that I'm aware of in Brood War that was publicly released that had tile set edits until my work. And that's just by itself absurd. Like, this is a game that didn't ship with north-facing ramps, guys. Like, what are you doing? Of course you need to edit the tile set, but no, like that. And that, by the way, of course, no other project ever had north-facing ramps on the tile set anyway. So it's not even like that's what
it was unthinkable. Nobody was gonna do that.
So the idea that like, yeah, that is as a complete project with tile set edits and all this other stuff. I mean, the last high-profile AI edits were probably in like one of those anime campaigns by Razor Claw X. So like that tells you all you need to know, right? I mean, of course, most of those AI scripts that were custom broke, but you know, it was still better than not having any AI at all, because it's not like the default stuff didn't break either. So yeah, what it comes down to is basically people back in the day, they did need to kind of have their own way around the tools, around the game. And they needed to, you know, a lot of it was jank, and there weren't really expectations that it would be a super high polished production or whatever. And, you know, to that extent, that's pretty much modding. Like, that's kind of the essence of it, is you don't have, like, your comparison of everything being sanitized now, it's like, well, because there was no check and balance, there was no, like, officialized support for it. It wasn't endorsed or anything. It was just like, oh, I guess we can do these things and hope that Blizzard or whoever doesn't shut us down. Like, that was basically the vibe. So because there was no oversight and support, there was also no tension that like maybe we're doing something like only the way that the developer can approve of. It's like, no, like they don't even have a chance to say anything. We're just going to do what we can, right? We're reverse engineering stuff, and we're making tools to do stuff that like, you know, the developers had access to all this stuff in their back end, but we have to do it through these like weird interfaces that are definitely not official. And the fact that that is a disconnect between how it used to be and how it is now really tells you everything that you need to know. And it does go back into the accessibility point where you do lower the barrier of entry. And now suddenly to make, you know, any given production, you can pretty much just start using official tools, official walkthroughs, etc. And yeah, it will be less interesting, right? And especially if it's because like, say what you will about the stupidity of using like PyDat or one of these other tools that are now being circulated for Brood War. They aren't made by marketing or whatever. They're not there just to satisfy the fact that, oh, we need this to have a mod support because that's a marketing tool or whatever, you know?
It's worth mentioning that official walkthroughs are very rare for any game. Most developers like Blizzard release their alleged tools, what they claim to be tools, and they might give you the most bare bones of introduction to them, and then they say it's completely unsupported, and they wash their hands of it. That is all across the board. That's what it's like. So usually you're given something that is superficially attractive. Like, let's say, for example, the Skyrim world actually manages to be a lot worse than StarCraft 2's editor, at least on the surface level. There is no hand-holding for any of that at all. There's nothing for it. Whereas opposed to generally with user-made tools, the developer has usually told you, hey, you do this or that.
Yeah.
As opposed to just releasing out completely blank. That's what official tools are always like. The only real exception is like Unreal Engine. And even then, the documentation for that is notoriously bad.
Well, there is a bunch of documentation for how to make a melee map for StarCraft 2 using the Galaxy editor or whatever, but I'm not actually sure if that's a Blizzard employee or if that's just something they put on their own website written by a community member. Or what.
I mean, StarCraft 2's help editor has always been a 404.
Yeah, it's definitely
you go to
not
help, it just takes you to a dead link. I think it does that to present day.
Yeah. Well, I can't say I'm exactly surprised necessarily, but you know.
Like, that tells you really all you... That kind of just encapsulates the whole experience. The whole difference in the experiences is the way Blizzard has treated custom content.
What a fucking shit show. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think when you have situations where people are just too lazy to even update links, it's probably not there because they really cared about supporting mods or whatever. I mean, Blizzard specifically has just like tried to redefine what mod even means to now.
Yeah.
Like, modding was always this thing that you can't do with any official tools or edit.
This thing that changes the whole game, right?
This modding is like manipulating something in a way that
now
is
some people think
against.
Dota is a mod.
Think what?
They think Dota is a mod now.
Yeah.
That's how far.
Well, that's what
fallen.
it's defined as instead of map or game mode or whatever, which would be more appropriate. I guess that kind of takes us to the Dota side, right? Like
it is literally just a map. Yeah.
We've covered the early days of like, hey, there's no developer. There's the developer partnered tools or whatever are very if they exist at all, like in StarCraft, they don't work very well, and they're I believe
There's
Blizzard
no pressure
used
for them to work
honestly.
well either.
Well, yeah, I believe Blizzard may have used Star Edit to actually build the campaigns because the campaigns are terrible and Star Edit's terrible. So that kind of checks out.
Makes sense.
You know, I don't know that. Like, I also believe that they've used World Edit in Warcraft 3, right? I believe that they use that.
They always do their data through XML.
Sure, yeah.
That is with Warcraft 3 and that
StarCraft
XML equivalent in Warcraft 3. But yeah, in StarCraft 2 the same. But I think they use the terrain editor. I think is the same that they both use.
And
but the way they did data is different.
Some of them triggers were GUI versus JAS as well. So like,
if you go by designer Dave, only one person in their entire company knew JAS.
Yeah, and it was like one of the higher ups or something. It might have even been Roper or somebody like that.
Makes you really wonder why they bothered to put in this janky, dysfunctional, undocumented system if only a single person in the company ever even bothered to use it.
Well,
makes you think, huh?
Really makes you think. Dude, I think I was like 8 and I was older than that. I can't remember how old I was. I was very young and I was like, oh, you can put in custom script or whatever, because they didn't even call it JAS in the editor. They were just like custom trigger script or something in there. And I just wrote like finish_map or something. Living in a fantasy land. No, yeah.
I remember I remember when I first used a 386. And nobody I was with knew anything about fucking computers at all. It's just like, here's a computer. And like, oh, this is new and fangled and neat. I wonder what this does.
Right.
And of course, it's a 386. It's all command line. And I'm like typing in stuff and nothing's happening. I'm like, man, computers are stupid. And to this day, I hold that opinion. Computers are stupid.
Yeah. It's 100% correct.
The more things change, the more they made the same.
Yeah. I'm not surprised that computers are stupid, but they certainly are. The thing about Warcraft 3 to me, it really does spell the downfall of custom content in some ways, but also it's not just custom content as like, oh, this medium of things where it's like this, look at this qualitative experience. You can have like high quality stuff or whatever. It's not that. It's like, it's that and it's more. It's the fact that the end user relationship with custom content is now like, okay, we can expect new games, new genres, new whatever to start off as these side projects for some hobbyist. And then it's fine and not something we hold against the main title if that overtakes that main title in terms of popularity. If people are mostly playing for that as opposed to the actual intended game that was there. Like somehow Dota ends up... So Dota overtakes Warcraft 3 as a thing that you play. Like you're not buying Warcraft 3 to play Warcraft 3. You're buying Warcraft 3 to play Dota.
Yep.
And okay, I get the fact that you're still buying Warcraft 3 and you're giving Blizzard money. But somehow Blizzard reputationally comes out with that being a positive for them, that you explicitly ignore their product so that you can experience a map inside that product, right? A custom little side thing, right? In like a 1/10 of the entire game max is like dedicated to the systems that are in Dota. Like it's a very small fraction of what Warcraft 3 is or was or what or could have been or whatever. And that is what you're experiencing. And somehow that's like, yeah, Blizzard is really good. They did a great job allowing us to not play their game. Like, I mean, I would also not want to play their game, but the fact that Blizzard comes off seeming like this is a great thing for them is really confusing to me. Like, surely that would be a negative in any other light, right? When you break it down, like your game was not good enough to hold people's attention relative to a custom map that somebody made and that many other people iterated on and whatever. Like, and as far as I know, IceFrog might have even been a fast follow with his version, but like whatever the case may have been, it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, here's my map, and now people are playing this game made by this AAA studio so that they can play my map made by a guy. And I just don't understand how that's a positive. And now when I see people talking about how they're supporting custom content, like this kind of, it's the bridge between the old world and the new world, where now the new world is, I just assume people don't know how to make a game that's going to hold people's attention. So they like throw that in as a marketing premise for the sake of like, guys, you could make Dota in our game too. And then you can like ignore our game too, bro. Like just don't even play our game. Like now the standard is so low that now it's fine if a game can't hold your attention because you can make your own game in that game. And I already have to do that with any game I play if I'm going to stick around with it a long time. I'm already looking for ways to like remove grind and make the game more interesting or make the enemies more aggressive or whatever, because it's already not good. But like I'm more specialized. I'm an actual designer or whatever. That's different. The average user now expecting to look for custom stuff instead of being able to really have a good experience with the content that is there by default, that is like a travesty. And I think Dota is how we get there. So talk to me about Dota. What do you think?
Well, Dota is only what it is because Warcraft 3 was a failure. Warcraft 3 was a failure end to end to end. Literally not a single thing was done right in Warcraft 3. So you had this huge player base that came as a result of Blizzard's brand, because the only thing that Warcraft 3 sold was brand loyalty, and that was it. They saw StarCraft and Diablo 2, and they thought, oh, Warcraft 3 will be good too. And then you get the buyer's remorse thing going, and the whole thing is really just people having no standards. People, and then the brand loyalty is a no standards thing too. It always has been. Just because this brand logo's on here, you assume it's going to be good, and that people to this day still stick to Blizzard despite everything on the board having been on there for 20-something years. And they just can't accept it because they would say they're wrong, and being wrong is like, that's crucifixion for the vast majority of these people. And they're literally NPCs. The NPC meme is so real. It's honestly haunting how real it is. Because it's so hard to even get into the brains of these people who are just, it's not even just loyalty, it's like mindlessness. Because Dota is just a map. It's just some guy ripped off of a StarCraft map and made it in Warcraft 3. And why was it popular? Because Warcraft 3 made it popular by being a failure. And it wasn't just that Dota had a little bit of a community or something behind it and just sucked up all these things like a sponge. Is that Warcraft 3 was also too demanding for the kind of player base that it drew, because the kind of people who stuck with Warcraft 3 were already very lower level mentally. And they were already very simple individuals. Because really, anybody with 2 almonds to activate wouldn't have gotten involved in any of Warcraft 3 anyways. Like me. And as a result, Warcraft 3 as it was, not only was just bland, but I mean, people won't really entirely understand why it was bland. But it's also, Warcraft 3 still had some degree of needing to pay attention to play the game, whereas Dota doesn't. Dota is literally Warcraft 3 without any kind of real paying attention involved at all. It plays even more slowly, even more sluggishly. You only got one unit to worry about. It is a dream come true for the rapidly decaying mental state of the user base that Blizzard was drawing into their products. Because Warcraft 3, there was nothing about it that ever really appealed to really, like, it's honestly, a lot of the times, even today, a lot of people are still asking me, what is Blizzard's target user base? What is it? What is it supposed to be? Because you got like the what people might call like the hardcore players, people who actually play games. Blizzard hasn't been catering to that crowd since like Diablo 2, and hasn't even been like trying to push for that crowd. And the casual players really don't work with our products either, because, I mean, Warcraft 3's campaign, honestly, can you imagine the average user today trying to go through that campaign without being tremendously frustrated? I definitely can't. Because it is so much of a chore to go through, and casuals hate chores. I mean, well, casuals love chores in one sense. They like to be told it's a chore, but Warcraft 3 is like the menial, tedious chore of trying to manage this awful pathing and everything else. And then the multiplayer doesn't even exist, pretty much. But Dota is basically a godsend to these people, because you literally can... We play into an interaction that really wasn't even intended. You can't say developers intended this, but it's what it is. It's why these games have such a legacy of what they call a toxic player base, is because whenever you lose the game, you can just blame your teammates. You can always shift your blame onto somebody else whenever you lose the game. It lets you keep playing, and you don't have to feel bad about losing games, because it was their fault. My support was a retard, or my carrier was a retard, or the jungler didn't help me, or, you know, whatever. You know, why do I always get paired up with lower skilled teammates? You know, you can just throw any number of blame onto anybody else, and it absolves you, and it lets you just keep going. You don't have to face the reality of being a bad player having to improve, which 1 versus 1 gameplay, even in Warcraft 3, you know, you lose the game. Who's that on? It's on you. I mean, Warcraft 3 is tremendously imbalanced, but at the lower level, entry level, you're not going to worry about that.
In StarCraft 2 1v1s, oh, you won because you played
Swarm
Protoss.
hosts are bad. Yeah, it's, you know, yeah, the games are really imbalanced, but typically speaking, until you start getting into upper echelons, when you're just starting off, it's really going to come down to skill issues. Yeah. And, you know, StarCraft 2, that was like the Void Ray rush. And that was
my
years.
favorite.
I mean, it was great, but easily dealt with if you just paid attention. But you know what? Most people don't pay attention. And
hey, even in Cosmonic and Brood War these days, people don't scout. And so I'm still waiting for you to start putting some static defense.
Yeah, I got to get back to my biz. People probably forgot what it's like to see a hatchery inside their base a minute into the game.
Yeah, I haven't done that particular move yet, so... You know,
not ballsy.
Yeah, I've done the Wardens, the Photon Cannons. I haven't done the Hatcher.
But yeah, it's like Dota's psychological interaction with that is what kept it going. That's what, like, it Warcraft 3 gave it basically the jump start, because it had a lot of player base who were very, like, sexually confused. They didn't know what to do with their time or their lives. They invested into this Blizzard product, and Blizzard makes good games, right? So why don't we enjoy this game? Where do we go? And then, but now there's this map on Battle.net that keeps showing up, and their friends are talking about the Dota. You play a hero. It's competitive. It's a team game. You can play with your friends, and that's another entry point, which isn't a bad one, but you know, that's what gets you in. And then the retention is reinforced by the ability to lay your blame of failure on other people. And for the vast majority of people who play games at that point, and of course more commonly today, that's very important, being able to shift the blame of failure on other people. Which is why so many games started coming up with like achievements and participation awards and all this other shit, because people hate failure. People hate having to face self-improvement. And then you get the invert that, like, this is also why Dark Souls becomes really popular, is because Dark Souls is a terrible game, but you can fail in Dark Souls. And there is a crowd of people who don't like the games handing them success no matter what, and they want to fail, they want to have to improve. Because that's something intrinsic with the way that people are, is challenge is self-improvement, and people don't really realize it yet, but they crave that. They crave because it's the instinct to become the alpha male. And in order to become the alpha male, you got to overcome challenge, you got to be the very best. You got to catch them all the AIDS. You got to become a bug chaser. And in order to become the bug chaser, you got to fail. Well, the vast majority of people, especially new males, or new male lookalikes, they're not really into the whole failing thing. They just want to be handed success. They just want to live in the pod and have the bugs fed to them. They don't want to chase the bugs. And that's where we get into Dota. Because Dota is such a very, very, very low entry, low skill map, where even at the absolute highest level, really what defines the highest level for those kinds of games is going to be team play. And you
all you need to know, right, is that professional Quake players were playing Dota as a lark to pass the time when they just needed something to unwind, because that's how simple it was to them.
And it's also like you can really tell the kind of people that flooded these games, because when StarCraft 2 bombed after its release, pretty much all the professional players, except for the ones at the very peak that were, financially locked in, they jumped ship to League of Legends because the game is so much easier, so much more popular, there's more money involved. But it really is just that easy just to jump ship.
People might not remember there was like this elitism developing amongst the people who, like, for whatever reason, stuck around in StarCraft 2, and they were like, if you can't even get diamond in StarCraft 2, just quit and go to League of Legends, bro. Yep. And it's like, yeah, well, okay. On the one hand, StarCraft 2, I would probably say, despite that, at least partially maybe significantly because of the fact that it has so many fucking balance updates all the time, it probably is a more skill testing experience or whatever than League of Legends. But it's also a 1v1 game, so it's really hard to compare those two, right? And so that's where it comes back to the point you made earlier about how, you can't, if you're not willing to learn all of the changes every week or month or whatever the patch hits, then you probably shouldn't be playing competitive. But who the fuck would sign up for that to begin with, right? And of course, I mean, a lot of those same people probably also played League of Legends anyway, which has the same problems. So it seems like everybody seems to be fine with that. Like, it's a paradox, because you can't, you want to be able to absolve yourself of any blame, so you blame your teammates or whatever. But like, if the game is changing all the time, and you're also allegedly trying to seek, high something where you're getting more skill, or you're like going higher up the ladder, or you're improving in some way, then you would have to be studying the game every single time a patch hit. And so like, it just seems like this really strange thing where, like, it's very clear that they are not their own masters. They do not really understand what is their overriding impulse here, and that's why they're languishing in whatever fucking Wood 5 rank they're in. So, well,
certainly psychology is a very complex thing, and I would, was with all walks of people with League, including Freak, and then people in lower skill levels. And Freak was really funny to watch his games, because you would expect someone who has been a part of the company for so long to really be super successful, but no, he ran into the exact same problem. He had more problems than most people did at his rank, because obviously people are going to single him out. But there was also just like a lot of play that was just really not indicative of what he was supposed to be, in all likelihood because he just didn't have the chance to play that much. He wasn't on all the time because he had a job to do. And it's a very complex thing. But that was the rare days. That was way back when people actually had Riot in their game name. I had there was a few writers. I never played with Freak. I just talked to him since I knew him from back in the STF days. But there was another couple of individuals I played with. One of them, I think her name was Deerskin, and I don't know what role she was. She wasn't a caster. Some other lesser role or a side role. Like, I don't think it was like a CM or something. But it was just, it was the only time that I personally have ever seen anybody related to the development of a game, even loosely, actually play the game. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I never really thought too much of it. Like, a lot of people would be like, oh, I'm playing with the company people. This is so cool. I mean, it's just like, I know that these people are at least platinum, so thank God at least they're semi-competent and will communicate. Like, because, a lot of the times when people bitch about teammates, it's just them bitching because they lose a game. But there are just a lot of terrible people in those games, regardless of the levels. And so many times would I go into games that we would have an ADC who just leave the first time they died. And it was just like, okay, like, right, just throw the whole game. And,
hey, at least in Dota 2, I can control my AFK teammate.
Yeah,
I can be a micro god and run 2 champs at once.
Yeah, with these groups, it was just like, well, at least they're not going to quit.
Right, sure.
Like, I don't even care if they're good or not, so long as they're not going to be
That was one of the most
sabotaging
triggering things is when, you're literally like, you're just trying to say play the game. Like I typed the number of times back in my Diamond 2 run, I had to type just play or instead of, or like play for late game or some shit like that. It's like these people just have no mental game and just quit immediately. Like, how did you even get to the Diamond area if you can't fucking play the game for longer than 10 minutes? Like,
Diamond is so weird. I did so much spectating of both the like Freaks games whenever he was on, and then just of like the publicly viewable matches, the high end matches, and then the low level people. I watched, I would say easily like 1,000 or more games of League, and Diamond was just so strange. Like Gold was just basically the Wild West because he had all these people who were full of themselves because they were Gold, but they didn't actually know the game. And Diamond, these same people just ended up like they got to Diamond either by grinding thousands of games, which is some of their game counts was absolutely insane how high it was. And then others were just like the, people who were actually at the skill level. And you didn't usually see as much toxicity in Diamond or the stupidity, but when you did, it was so fucking off the rails and hysterical. Well, there were a lot of games where you go to spectate and they're like 2 minutes in, and like they were already beating on the inner towers because someone on the enemy team decided to rage quit really early in because of draft or something.
Yep.
And they were all just sitting there waiting to lose. And it was just like that was the first thing anybody goes into the client, goes to spectate game will see. It's this kind of shit. And then the chat, I got a lot of good screenshots of chat. And it's just like, it's funny. And going back to Dota, it is a problem that Dota became what it is because people don't really understand why it became what it is. They assume that, a guy made a map and it was successful, so if I support custom content, someone's going to make a Dota, and then my game's going to be successful as a result. They don't understand, like, Dota was a fluke in the exact same sense that StarCraft was a fluke. Like, World of Warcraft was a fluke, too. And, some of these flukes are well educated. Like, World of Warcraft, I think that there was a lot of marketing research behind World of Warcraft, and World of Warcraft came at just the right time in the right industry, and it can't be repeated. A lot of these flukes, they cannot be repeated. Once the golden egg is laid and eaten, that's it. That's the only one you're going to get because of the circumstances that made them what they are. World of Warcraft would never succeed at all in any actual... Like if you release, and people have tried so many times now to release World of Warcraft again, it's not going to succeed because it's already happened. Which is the MMO market in the West was just completely untapped because Blizzard want to draw in people who aren't gamers.
Yeah.
And he had this nebula that they created with Warcraft 3 and stuff like that of people who are not gamers. They are the kind of people that Dota is sucking up. And Blizzard, on the side, they had this research going with MMOs and stuff like that. And the only other MMOs you had were titles that had a much higher entry barrier. There was more permanence, like, I don't know a lot about them, but I think like Dark Age of Camelot's one of them. Lineage 2 is another. MMOs at the time were viewed as strictly like Asian grind games. And in many cases, that was a well-earned reputation. Of course, there's private servers and stuff for a lot of them too, like for Lineage 2. But, that's just another barrier. And the kind of people they wanted to bring into the games industry were people who didn't understand how to run mods that are just like double-click an exe and you're done. The kind of people who don't understand what direct downloads are like for videos and stuff like that. And I've run into a few of those. And they realize there's a market of these people who are just waiting to be deprived of their money. And then, when you capitalize on that, it makes this big explosion and all the other companies and people take notice. They're like, wow, you can make this and you can be this successful with this little work. So now you had all of the WoW killers come out all over the place, to this day, people copy pasting World of Warcraft to the T. And one thing you'll find out is not a single one of these people paid attention to World of Warcraft, what World of Warcraft did right. So Final Fantasy XIV is really the biggest one, the biggest World of Warcraft copy paste. And that's a really long story. But the nut of it is that they copy pasted World of Warcraft as hard as they could while never actually playing World of Warcraft. Because there was things World of Warcraft did right. The control scheme and responsiveness in general, the way that your movement and stuff worked. To this day, Final Fantasy XIV still can't get that right. The user interface in Final Fantasy XIV is still the exact same way it was when it released on consoles. And it is just fucked and annoying as hell to work with and slow and gross. And they've never fixed it because they just don't give a shit. And it's just like the movement and stuff like that, the netcode is all a horrible disaster. There's still such a huge delay between what happens in the world, what registers to you, and what you do. And if you watch your party members move around and you record videos and show each other, it's just fucking hysterical. And World of Warcraft had so many problems, but really not these kind of fundamental issues. But people saw World of Warcraft and they thought, oh, that's successful. So we copy-paste the formula, will also be successful. And the same was the case with DotA. Now, DotA is just a series of really silly circumstances, coincidences, and moon alignments. And then you got League of Legends, which really was very heavily reinforced by Blizzard's continued failures. See, Blizzard basically tried their hardest to kill their company as much as possible. And people just would not let them kill their company because, gosh darn, we're going to just keep giving them money even though they're not giving us a product. So World of Warcraft et al., they just kept shedding players and then bringing in players and then shedding players. And they even, I think they've stopped giving fiscal reports on half their products at this point. I know they did a while ago for Heroes of the Storm because they were so embarrassing. And they just stopped telling about like the numbers and stuff like that because they're bad. They're bad. And then lo and behold, they can Heroes of the Storm. And Heroes of the Storm was a product that they very well were in a position to have very successful. But again, they just didn't want to put in the effort. And the result of this, of course, is that they fed a lot of players to League of Legends. StarCraft 2 was the best thing that could have happened for Riot. The absolute best thing. Because gosh darn if Riot aren't trying to kill their own company with all their fucking privacy, just violation of privacy and everything they've got going on. Their workplace ethics are just as good as Daddy Blizzard's. And now Blizzard's bringing it back in Chris Metzen because people who are most well known for being drunk on the job is precisely the kind of people you want to have.
For people
on
who
your
don't
staff.
know, Riot Games, there's this amazing, there's all the fucking female abuse and weird culture where they're like, hey man, I got my fuck list of all my coworkers. Like, okay, that's reasonable behavior. But there was some guy who literally was just walking around farting in his coworkers' faces in the fucking office. Like that, up until the breast milk stealing at Blizzard, I thought that really was peak game development tech bro
peak
culture.
California, yeah.
Peak California hazing. It's like actual hazing though. It's like hazing him with your ass.
It's the equivalent of Blizzard's Metzen running around yelling at people and saying, I am the war chief.
Yeah, well, I guess both of those, his breath and that other guy's ass might smell equally bad.
Yeah, they're pretty much the same thing, really. They're both intoxicating in their own ways.
Yeah, so I'm forever flabbergasted how that company is still in business. And also it's
amazing.
There's that, which is on the human level, you gotta feel for whoever fucking walked into that office and got his face farted in. But you also have to think this is also a company that's just in bed with China as mass killings are happening in their country. Yeah. And you guys are just this is fine on both cases. I don't care about farts and I don't care about Muslims. Okay.
You support Hong Kong? That's a no-no.
Yeah, Blizzard is the same way, right? I don't support breast milk. I don't support Hong Kong either. Fuck that,
Imagine if some employee went on to their Twitter account and toasted, I support Taiwan.
Yeah.
Oh, man, they would be dead within the day.
Well, John Cena had to issue an apology in Mandarin because he did that, so that's all you need to know.
But yeah, the DotA thing is just it's a product of the times and of the coincidences and stuff that led to it. And that the companies know this. Blizzard's well aware of this because they tried to sue for the name DotA because somebody made a map in their game so they own it.
Yes, yeah.
And
that's sort of what you were saying earlier when you said they drove a lot of people to League. It's they refused to capitalize on this thing that was made in, as far as I know, Ice Frog wanted to make it in, he wanted to make it for Blizzard, and then Valve got him because Blizzard said no or whatever. And that's
Blizzard's no, that money is ours.
Yeah. Well, it kind of adds fuel to the fire of hey, they didn't realize that, or maybe they did realize that oh, this is actually bad that we, our game got overshadowed. It really shows
such a huge disconnect.
Yeah. So they decide, it's actually our game is better and we don't want to cater to that or whatever. I don't know, whatever the fuck they were thinking, but
honestly, my astute belief is that they just don't think.
Could be. I mean, if they don't
Like,
think, I don't understand why they would not.
Their programming just breaks and they just start screeching and drinking.
If they don't,
and farting.
I guess if they have zero impetus to do anything, if they have no interest in doing anything, then maybe the laziness is what's...
Like, there's been a lot of theories proposed to me that Blizzard's actually just running a really, really, really sophisticated fraud scheme where because they keep making these long winding products and then canceling them over and over and over and over. And that
Titan turned into
Overwatch,
money,
right?
I think, right? Titan was in for a long time, and then they retrofitted that into Overwatch.
Because it's just like money laundering. Like, they just suck up all this money for these products, and then they cancel quotation them. And then a lot of the times, and they've admitted to this, is that they treat game products as a mean to an end. Like, that's what they did with Ghost. Ghost was there to absorb another company. And, you got these people who have mined the data now, and the game looks to be like a lot of the assets and stuff look to be pretty much completed. Like, why was it canceled? Because it wasn't ever about the game. It was about stripping a company and taking what employees they wanted out of it. Now, why did they do that? They didn't do anything with the employees.
They certainly didn't make a game afterwards.
It's when you're dealing with these long dinosaurs that have well outlived their usefulness, and they're not making games, and they haven't been making games for decades. You ask just a lot of questions, like, what is the point? You probably will never know, because that's just behind all these books and the CEOs and the pen pushers and the banks, and it's just about taking money out of people's hands one way or another. However they get it, doesn't matter. And yes, Dota is just a product. Like, the modern idea of Dota is a product of that. Is that it's just how people want to make money. And they saw that Dota was successful and Dota was a map, so they're just trying to either force it's the esports thing too. Because like StarCraft was successful in esports. So if we say we support esports, we'll be successful just like StarCraft was. They think so long as they say it enough times, it'll just happen. So there's no effort in that shit. Like with StarCraft 2, it was just like the esports towers and the fucking icons and the shit they've got laying on the ground that just clutters the screen. And the streaming indicate like just.
Oh, I guess you might not even know that. They added a unit that literally throws an indicator at you. That was in the Legacy of the Void expansion. It's called the Disruptor. It's a spinning ball, and it throws a smaller spinning ball. That is literally an indicator. Also, the Liberators create a larger indicator, and then if you step in it, you get hit.
I know those units, and I remember being so confused by them. Like the indicators thing is just... Indicators
were a brilliant innovation for single-player content. Now they're coming to multiplayer, boys. Like, what?
Yeah, the indicators thing has always... That is just... God, you get me started and I could be here for hours. Indicators piss me off so fucking much every single time I see them. Because it is an admission that you don't want to make reads in the game. Yeah. It is literally saying, I'm too fucking lazy to make this a part of the game. So it rips you right out of any immersion you would have had. It rips you right out of it. Every single time.
As far as I'm
look, there's something big and red. It's Simon Says, don't stand in this. LOL.
Dance Revolution, bro.
Yeah, basically. But at the same time, each and every single game treats these very differently and how accurate they are and what the timing is supposed to be. You have Final Fantasy XIV, where it is so fucking desynced that so long as you're just not standing in the indicator right when it ends, you won't get hit by it. Even if the actual animation for the damage comes like a full fucking 2 seconds later, it's the indicator tick that's setting up the damage because the game is so fucked. And so you can literally just tap in and out if you can time it right, and you'll just never get hit by anything because it's just one frame. And then you have Terra. So I was just talking with Nia the Realm or whoever it was yesterday about Terra. What I forgot to mention is that Terra had a reboot. Because a lot of these MMOs, these WoW killers, they come out and they instantly tank. Because it turns out they didn't do any research and the market's oversaturated and yada, yada, yada. A lot of them have good ideas. Terra had good ideas. And then they tank. And a lot of the times what ends up happening is the original developer kind of like gives up, gets bought out, dies, whatever. And they get shoved off onto these localization companies that are even worse. And that's what happened with Terra. And then they rebooted it, basically, because they got to like rebrand the name to try to make some kind of money out of their investment. And they re-released it. And what they did with Terra is they added indicators to basically every single thing in the game. So everything in the game makes this glowing red or orange box in front of them when they're going to attack. And it's
well, I just view that as like literally the game's not finished. Like this is like placeholder developer art to say, hey, there's a threat here or something, you know? Like, like, you know, maybe you expect that in like, you know, that somebody hasn't gone through and made particles or whatever yet. So here's a fucking
because it's just like you want to tell the player something's going to happen. Well, that's fine. That we have something called reads for that, but we just don't do that anymore. Like nobody does that anymore. It's fucking fascinating how far games have fallen, and like I mean, Dragon Age Dogma has its problems, but it doesn't have that, right? And you know, it's just like you step back after this and you're like, this was supposed to be the next World of Warcraft, because that's what they're doing with all these MMOs is they're trying to remake World of Warcraft, but you realize this is so fucking far from just being a game, much less being a competitor for World of Warcraft. Because it's not just they have to make World of Warcraft, you have to make World of Warcraft that has to be better. But nobody does their research. So how many fucking Dota clones have come out? Way too fucking many. And they all just died up because you're climbing uphill when you're trying to do this. It's not like Dota suddenly disappeared and you're making a new Dota. Dota is still there. You are climbing uphill. You're trying to recreate the success of something that's already successful and remains successful. And then you're trying to take away their user base. And in order to do that, you got to do what they do, and you got to do it a lot better. Now, that really probably isn't that difficult, but people don't really put in the effort to do that.
Well, I was saying this when I was interviewing Jonathan Blow again for the third time, because and I said to him, like, you know, I was about to say, you know, maybe don't have crazy aspirations for your first game or whatever. Like I was saying, like, you know, you can have like a small step, but it's still something that's worthwhile. But then I realized, like, oh, actually, because like the quote is always, oh, this RTS is the StarCraft killer. Like, actually, our first game is going to be that, because it's the only game to fucking take Brood War and actually build on top of it, instead of like cargo culting a side grade, downgrade, or just doing something completely different and not learning from it at all, to like use your World of Warcraft analogy.
Well,
right?
RTSs have this unhealthy obsession with StarCraft 2 was too difficult, so we got to make it easier by adding in heroes and removing all the macro.
Yeah.
Like, where the fuck does that even come from? Like, that's again just people not doing any research. They look at Warcraft 3 and say, Blizzard took StarCraft and made Warcraft 3, and that was smaller scale, and that had heroes, and that was successful, so that's the way you got to go. And instead of thinking, wait a second, StarCraft outlived Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2.
Yeah.
And every other potential competitor come after it.
Yeah.
StarCraft still outlives each and every single one of those to this day. Maybe StarCraft did something right.
Yeah.
Oh, gaming and competitive play wasn't as evolved when StarCraft 2 or StarCraft 1 first came out. And yet it became so massive and it grew on its own without developers holding its hand. Maybe StarCraft did something right. Nope. Got to remove all the actual things that define an RTS and make a shitty RTT point-and-click adventure instead. And what do you know? It fails each and every single time because nobody actually does any research on anything. They're not paid to do research. They're just yes men brought in to make some fucking Redditor's opinion sound more intelligent to him than it really is.
I continue to play all of these like Korean StarCraft clones, and you found the dinosaur stream earlier this week, and you know what's up with that. Yeah,
that'll be
yeah.
Added in my brain for a long time.
Yeah, well, they only have like 3 unit responses, and that's one of them. So, the thing that gets me about all of these games that I'm playing that are very clearly like, even if it's very different subject matter, like it's the dinosaur game or whatever, or like your vital device, you're in the human body,
the incel dinosaur game.
Yeah, exactly. Like, even if that's the case, it's still very inspired by Brood War. It's very clear what their influences were, right? And there might be some other RTS games or whatever, but that they're taking influence from, or they're workshopping. But a lot of it is like a riff or a meditation on what Brood War did. And, you know, okay, a lot of it is like very obvious. Like, there's a fucking, okay, here's a structure called bunkers, not bunker singular because we don't know
Soldier
English.
House.
And yeah, Soldier House. Well, at
least it's better than House.
Well, in Vital Device, you literally build a single structure, and its name is bunkers, plural. So you build
Oracle is inspired.
Yeah. He was inspired by Jurassic War 2, which has Soldier House, Powerhouse was another one. And then, of course, Build Man versus Power Man versus Soldier. I think it's just Soldier. I don't think it's Soldier Man.
I wonder if those are just like all like translations,
Yeah.
because I've heard that StarCraft's translation in Korean is a real mess too.
It might be. I actually haven't ever. You translate it there and back again and see what you get. But like the thing that strikes me about all of these is that if you just take Brood War and then you use that as your base for like, okay, we're going to make some different decisions. We're going to do some things differently or whatever. Maybe we'll have one resource instead of two. Maybe we'll have, I don't know, some different number of races or different number of units or different ideas within that or whatever. Like some slightly different mechanics. Like Aatrox, another very obvious StarCraft clone, has you build the add-ons with the workers instead of with the structure itself. And you can, you know, build them in different spots depending on which add-on it is. So like there's unique positions depending on which one you got. And I think maybe you could do more than one. I can't remember. But so like, okay, there's like a meditation or riff on the add-on mechanic from Brood War. Okay, there's like a little bit of a different system there. Like that still feels way more like an RTS. Like it's not hard to give me something that resembles an RTS game. And even if the campaign map design or whatever might not be good, I can go into skirmish and I can play an RTS against an AI that seems to want to win in a lot of these games. And maybe it's not super good at playing the game, but it's still trying to win. It's building, going through a build order, building some stuff, like doing things, expanding. And then the game actually has all of these features to begin with. Like, I can't believe that we've regressed in that sense too, where like now, okay, playing a modern RTS game that doesn't have like heroes and call down spells and fucking automation for workers or whatever. And it's like, what? Like, where does all of this stuff come into play? Like, why is that there instead of just allowing me to have an RTS game? Like, why did they feel the need to do that? And yeah, I don't know. Like, maybe you can argue that a lot of that comes down to simply not understanding what was good about the original games, right? And that's sort of what we see with this whole Dota stuff and the custom content thing is like people think that Blizzard did great because a map overtook their game in Warcraft 3's case. And people think that like, you know, custom content now must be a requirement. It's like a misread of what is necessary or what is good or whatever. And to bring us back to the custom content angle, it just feels to me like so many different, narratives about this are now just like falling apart when you analyze them or examine them at all. The narrative that you need custom content in order to succeed, that assumes like I'm now, this is a very uncharitable interpretation of the premise that custom content is worth putting into your game, like supporting custom content is worth doing. But I now feel like most people uttering that, 99% of people who think that and are acting on that by putting that into their game, are simply just not confident in their own content. And now they're just, like I said earlier, they're allowing you to say, hey, you can, don't worry if you don't like our game, you can build your own game in our game.
It's
Please
an
buy
excuse. No, it is. It's an excuse for that. You know, that's one of the things that really pisses me off in general when anybody says that, because it brings me back to fucking Bethesda. Like, Skyrim has no business selling. And a lot of people will say, well, I just mod Skyrim to fix this or that. I just download something off of Nexus.
Yeah, let me just go and fix my experience by doing, like, customizing it or whatever. Like, that really doesn't make any sense when it's fixes specifically.
And then the developer makes all this money and is super successful off of the backs of people who are too dumb to not support their shitty business model.
No.
And as a result, the other developers see, hey, this is successful, so why don't we do it? And then the bar is lowered more and more and more and more and more, and the products get worse and worse and worse and worse. And I mean, Skyrim is so fucking bad, and the Gamebryo engine is so fucking bad that mods can't fix it.
No.
And the problem is that also this lack of standards transcends to the mods. The most popular mods for Skyrim, like Deadly Dragons or whatever. You know what Deadly Dragons does? It spawns damage on top of you and ramps up stats. That's their idea of making the game and Dragons more interesting. Is they spawn stuff on half the times I instantly die in my run, it's because the dragons just decide to spawn damage on top of me. Oh, that's exciting! Wow! You sure made dragons so much more interesting by arbitrarily spawning damage on top of me. That's so cool! Wow! That's what people think is a great mod, a great addition to this game, because nobody gives a shit about the game. And you know, obviously I'm a person who's made these video compilations of bugs and shit for games for years and years and years and years. So that brings in people from all walks who come to laugh at buggy games. But the amount of times I've seen people just completely fucking wash over the fact that these games are hideously untested pieces of shit is so crazy. Like, people are like, oh wow, I love this game, it's got a few quirks about it. Dude, nothing fucking works in this fucking game. They released it like this. It's like this 5 fucking years later, and you're just gonna not even comment about that. Like, games are such an untested fucking mess. And then on the flip side, in the occasional rare case, say, oh, modders will fix that.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that in the case of I think it was something Bethesda related. I don't know. This
probably the Fallout
be a
76
hot mess,
game,
but
or
modders will fix it out.
Yeah.
Like,
well, this is where
dude.
It's like this weird crossover where now standards have lowered, and every game at this point has all of these launch issues. But if the game has mod support, you can rest assured that, modders will be the saviors.
Somebody else will fix their mess for them.
Yeah. So now you're simultaneously giving a pass to the developers who didn't do their job, and also it opens the door for somebody who fixed a bug using a mod and probably introduced a bunch of other issues to think that they are now stepping towards game development, which is the other narrative of this. Is like, dude, check out my mod that like changes one thing and breaks 10 other things and isn't. I should be paid for this, obviously. So like that's like the game development / give me some money on PayPiggy or whatever is like really embarrassing.
Well, you can knock that all you want, but a guy whose greatest claim to fame was recoloring a few units in Warcraft 3 is now a lead level designer in Blizzard.
Who is that? Who? What is the?
That is Warbringer, and that is why we have a bunch of our characters in Diablo 3, a bunch of our names. Because it's not like with his case, it's unique because he lived in the area and he talked to a recruiter.
Right.
So he got in through that avenue more than anything else. But when you look at it from a literal point of view, is as far as I ever knew, he never did anything more sophisticated than that ever. And I talked to him pretty much daily. He was someone who I had regular contact with. And he did like some terrain for Warcraft 3 that I used in my campaign. And he did this recolor stuff. And then that was it. Like, he had no real anything else other than that. No real aspirations, anything other like that. But he talked to a recruiter, and, I don't even know, like, what he studied or what he was doing. But, of course, other than, like, he was actually initially on board for StarCraft 2's editor. But this was sort of towards the tail end of development. So he's one of the people I talked to extensively trying to get, some of our wishes into the editor, like for the user interface and stuff like that. And, he showed me like mock-ups and stuff he was showing them, but none of that ever made it through. And then he got pushed to Diablo 3. And then I think he's on Diablo 4 as leads. Or, no, I don't know if it's lead. Don't quote me on that. I think it's senior. He was senior level designer in Diablo 3, and he might be lead. Or senior still. And, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if he's even in the company anymore. I haven't heard from him for years.
Sure,
he disappeared. He they always they had other people go into Blizzard too, and then other people who went in other companies. Like Magic, of course, was in Codemasters, and they disappear when they go in there. It destroys them. It destroys them, and I don't think it's like just a work environment, but I think it's the realization that you're not. This is what you thought was your dream job, but it really wasn't.
Sure.
And like that's the case with most people. That was the case for Magic. Is Magic went into Codemasters. I forget what his role was, but he found himself basically doing a lot of chores over and over and over and over. He found himself like basically extending outside of his work constantly, and they would not raise his pay or compensate him for that at all. And he ended up quitting. Yeah, he quit. And now, as far as I understand, Magic is living quite happily. I believe he actually owns property and may or may not have a wife or something. I heard from him like a couple of years ago. And, Warbringer, I don't know if he's even alive. I'm pretty sure he got into alcohol pretty early into coming into Blizzard. I do remember a conversation about that. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was from the work environment because...
it's just like 9 a.m. drinking or whatever is like
Yep.
a default over there, or whatever
Yep.
the time was in the morning.
Wouldn't be surprised if that's how that started.
Yeah.
No, he disappeared. And he was one of the people who told me that, Activision is not the problem with Blizzard. He wouldn't go into details, so I can't say anything, but sometime after the merger, one of the last times I heard from him, when I was talking about Activision, he said, no, Activision is not the problem. And he's a person whose opinion I would trust on the matter, given obviously he has firsthand experience with a lot of this stuff. But, I don't know what happened to him. I have no idea what happened to him at all. But I like the guy. I consider him a friend, even though I haven't heard from him forever. But no fucking way was he at all prepared in a real work environment to work as such an important position in any of these games. I mean, when you look at the level design for Diablo 3, it was just a train wreck. I believe that he actually had a large or dominating role to play in the I don't know what they're called. The gateways in the end of Diablo 3. We never got into them in our playthrough since it was short-lived, but the random item grind, very weirdly populated maps. I want to call them Abyss Gates, but I think I'm just thinking of fucking Epic 7 or something. I can't remember what they're called. The worst part of the game, really. And, right. I just think of I have some familiarity. I don't know this guy very well, but I have some familiarity with who is behind this portion of the game that we did play a lot. I played quite a bit of Diablo 3. I will admit I played quite a bit with HKS and with Hercanic. And this part of the game, like the whole game's obviously a disaster, but this part of the game felt so superficial and so slapped on. And I had to think of it in a different light than I might normally for a game because I know who was behind it. I know what his history was. I know that this isn't somebody who had no exposure to stuff. He worked with me to some extent. I mean, sure, in my younger years when I wasn't, didn't have two elements to activate either. I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do or trying to do. But at least I was somebody who still had so many aspirations to do more. Mm-hmm. So, and then this person comes from this community with people who at one point were like that. And yet what they did with Diablo 3 was so shallow and lifeless and emotionless and just lightless. It was just so bad. And I try to think back. I think, how could this person who was exposed to all this aspiration and inspiration settle for so little? Was like, how much really does... You don't know how the company structure is, how much she actually has a say in this stuff, but when you're working with somebody else's work and you see something like that, and you see that this is all they could do after so many years and how pathetic it is, you just start to wonder, like, what the whole system is a problem. Like, when we look at the erosion of standards and this obsession with turning modding into a bullet point that you sell for, it is just completely that people have no standards, people want no standards, and consumers are more than happy to accept having no standards. Like, in what fucking world does it even make sense for the statement, a company released a shitty product, let's wait for somebody else to fix it? How does that ever encourage you to support that product? But that's what people are begging for these days. It is that, like, in so many cases, we find people constantly dancing around this subject because they refuse to look the fucking problem horse in the mouth. I mean, horse's eyes are creepy as fuck. But, like, products are bad, and you shouldn't support bad products. Stop encouraging bad development ethics. That's simple. It's simple to say, it's simple to do. People can't accept that. People just hope for the problems to resolve themselves. And they're basically saying, when they say these things, is this is a shitty developer, but we trust that somebody else will invest all their time and all their energy in fixing this shitty product so that I can then enjoy it. That is what people say when they want mod support in today. Back then, mod support was more like people would see, like Half-Life 2 in Source. They would see the engine. as a means to create a vision. We don't have any of that today. People don't create visions today. People create fucking Fuda. And
you got to pay for that Fuda. That's premium microtransaction mod Fuda. You Patreon me right now for that Fuda.
The Fuda devs put more effort into their shit than most people do these days. It's sad.
True.
Like,
Probably true.
You look at like Stormgate. What's going to come out of that? Shitty recolors and Dota clones, just like StarCraft 2. And you know what? The subject of Dota, you have to get into StarCraft 2, and you have to realize how bad this idea has already failed. Playing this for everybody to see is StarCraft 2 came out. Everybody wanted to be the next Dota.
Oh yeah, they had premium maps that launched like 10 years late, and only 2 maps ever made it the cut. I think. I don't know. I stopped following it, but.
And, I mean, like I mentioned before, StarCraft was going to launch with that.
Oh, yeah.
And Blizzard dropped the ball about as hard as it possibly could. And I like to think that red pilled a few people in that. But I think that the people we were working with were too fucking blinded by fanboyism and inexperience and youth to realize how badly that Blizzard was actually treating them, even though it was plain as all to see when the company that we're supposed to be working with is not responding to us for months at a time and giving us absolutely nothing to work with, and we're literally waiting on them. And all they have to do is just send us a fucking email. You know, these people don't realize just how the companies treat them like complete disposable shit. And that is how companies view modders, is it is just disposable shit. None of these companies give a shit about custom content. The custom content in the eyes of most developers is something that deprives them. It's why after the whole Dota incident, Blizzard really doubled down on making sure that their legal framework was as leak-proof as possible. So this can never happen again.
Dude, that's why it's so funny when you look at a map in a custom campaign and the map description says epic map, copyright me.
Yep. Because, a lot of people don't realize that. They don't realize that, I mean, this has been the case for a long time. Blizzard is kind of just doing what a lot of developers have already done, is nothing you make is owned by you. It isn't. And if you want to try to contest that in court, good fucking luck. You won't be able to afford to go to court to begin with.
Yeah.
And if you did end up in court, you would get destroyed because you signed all these agreements. Now, in a lot of cases...
Like, listen, I mean, people can say, oh, big bad company beats little guy in court because all of this money and stuff. But also, like, really, should you be able to say that that's your copyrighted material? Yeah. Like, you fucking made it using in many cases, their tools these days, right? Increasingly use their tools. But you definitely use their game.
Their engine.
You've definitely used their assets and their code and all of this other stuff. And all you've done is, like, change the arrangement, bro. It's like, okay, yeah. I mean, it's a little bit different than when it's like the only thing I'm using is like maybe sampled audio from a song to like rejig it to make it sound something completely different. Then it's like materially distinct. But like in this case, all I'm doing is, you know, I'm only taking all of the sound fonts that you copyrighted in your song, and then I'm only like slightly changing one pitch a little bit, and then I'm only re-releasing it. Come on, that's copyright me, bitch. Like, no, that doesn't
let
make
me get
sense.
into the whole argument about transformative work.
Right, yeah.
What constitutes as a transformative work? Because you have this very same problem just in a different way with YouTube, where people are doing
reaction videos.
Well, not reaction videos. I don't even want to get into that. That they're so stupid. But
I guess you're thinking of like the mashups and the YouTube poops or whatever.
Yeah, the mashups, like the gachi ones are particularly common, where people take something and then they auto tune the fuck out of whatever and turn it to like the International Wrestling Festival is one of my favorites. Yeah. And also the Old Spice collaboration was great too. But at the same time, like you're taking all these people's music, but then you're like completely fucking changing. At what point does it become like a transformative work? At what point does it become okay to redistribute something as a transformative work? And you quickly like reach the point where like the copyright system was never made with any of this kind of stuff in mind at all. I mean, the copyright system in general is a dinosaur that's been kept alive so that it can keep fueling the pockets of these people, like the whole Mickey Mouse lawsuit thing. You know, keep filling the pockets of these people who really just don't deserve it. But you do realize that when you get into the custom content and the ownership thing, that you do have to kind of make a whole new set of copyright
usually
legally is to handle it.
Usually, like, the accepted idea, especially with regards to fair use with like YouTube stuff, is like, is this a material replacement for what my thing is? Like, could they go to this thing and be like, oh shit, that's competing with my thing? Like, obviously nobody's gonna go to the song and then say, oh wait, there's a gachi version of this fucking song or music video or whatever, so I'm gonna watch that instead. It's like, if anything, you might watch it in addition to, but you wouldn't use that as a replacement because it's not the same song with slight changes. Whereas, like, it's a lot harder to make that argument if you've made a custom map and it's like inside.
And it's like 90% third-party material. Yeah.
So it's like that could be a material replacement insofar as if you wanted to start saying, hey, pay me for this map. It's like, well, I mean, it is weirder because you have to pay for the base product to begin with, or I guess you could pirate it or something. But like you have to pay for the base product to begin with in order to even access the map. But if you're going to try to charge money for that, it's like most of that is not your work, though. So
you don't deserve to be paid for it.
Yeah,
but at the same time, the company doesn't own your ideas,
right?
Yeah. Like they shouldn't be able to say, "Oh, you made a map in my game, so I own every single thing that you made." Like the Blizzard trying to sue for the Dota name was just. Like that's the whole like complete like reverse of insanity,
and that's why they lost, right?
I'm sorry, Blizzard, you don't
thing
own
that
the
they
name
ended
Dota.
Up losing that particular case is like,
imagine if they had won, what precedent that would be set today.
Yeah, well, I would just have to say like, okay, if I ever used any proper nouns in any custom map, I have to then never use them in any future project. Otherwise, I might get sued. You used that fucking faction name in this map here, and now you released a game.
Well, it's already really murky grounds because. You know, modders are typically very limited in skill sets. They got to make use of anything they find lying around. But anything you got to find lying around, like, especially because of Bethesda trying to implement selling mods and that fracturing their community, it really sort of exposed this kind of legal thing.
Yeah.
But obviously, like in my case in particular, because now I'm not making a mod, I'm trying to make a game. And even if I'm not selling it, if I redistribute it publicly, now there's a lot more scrutiny. Because in a mod, you kind of just expected you're going to be ripping crap from all over the place.
Yeah.
But when you put, you know, like an independent engine up that's generally associated with commercialization, you start ripping stuff and putting it in there, there's more visibility on the subject. And you start coming into the concept of, well, you know, when you take an asset from something, someone's got to protect their interests. And, you know, with Blizzard and mods, man, this is its own. Like, every time you talk about mods in Blizzard, it's just like this giant branching mess.
Yeah.
And one of those branching messes is, for the longest time, Hive Workshop and its shitty progenitors, like Warcraft Research, were obsessed with the idea that you couldn't use World of Warcraft assets inside Warcraft 3, that it was illegal. They thought it was illegal. And this was long after, Blizzard had this marketing plan where they would feature maps. In the very first map they featured World of Warcraft assets, which they wouldn't do if they were going to legally punish you for doing this. And then, of course, with StarCraft 2, Blizzard would later say, oh, yeah, you can just use anything from any of our games in any of our games.
But you can't name your StarCraft 2 arcade map Diablo. Put a space between Dia and Blow.
You can't have suicide as a weapon name in StarCraft 2.
Yeah, pay no attention
Which is
to the
attack name for the Scourge. And, there's a lot of other silly censorship. But it's like the legal framework for like the fair use of assets is its own murky fucking mess, which, of course, with mods, it's like, you know, 99% of people aren't going to bat an eye about downloading whatever. And we crossed this road with Carbot that I'll mention again with fonts, is that fonts are also an asset, and they also have copyright associated with them. And this was something this guy was paid to make, $90,000 through Scamstarter. And, you know, we were going to feature on Blizzard's launcher, and allegedly was going to be, you know, until the very end when they fell through, you know, the premiere for their marketplace. And this guy, Carbot's just find any font on Google. Just Google for a font. Like, he does one thing, which is make these really shitty cartoons. He doesn't understand the first thing about modding, game development, legal stuff whatsoever. And HGS had to explain that, yeah, you can't just do that, because there is actually copyright associated with fonts. And, you know, you're kind of like walking that road now where you're trying to make these assets, and you're kind of like trying to check what these assets are released under, what you can distribute them for. And
well, it goes a step further, because if I find out that they're ripped from a game, it doesn't matter whoever the fucking ripper is that decided to put like Creative Commons license on. It's like, well, bro,
they have no ownership.
You don't own this fucking thing, so I have to like make sure it's not from a game that, you know, if I'm.
And I kind of walked that road too, Because like I mentioned before, there is Jetty92 on the Epic Market Store. You can check him up. He's got these dragon assets and a bunch of other stuff that are using one-to-one ripped World of Warcraft animations. One-to-one being sold on the marketplace to this day. And some of them are even to the point where he's even named them the same. Like one of his werewolf has Worgen Run or something on it. And it's, lo and behold, it's the Worgen Wild Run animation from World of Warcraft. And I sent Epic this information, and they said, if you want to file a DMCA claim, you have to be the DMCA holder. So I'm like, okay, I'll contact Blizzard's legal office. And so I contacted Blizzard's legal office, and I have not gotten a response like half a year later. And this guy's stuff's still being sold.
Yeah, bro, there's like Star Wars and Halo models you can pay for from people who are not affiliated, like just ripped it, basically, you know?
And I guess at some point, even I don't know if Blizzard even has a legal office anymore. Maybe they all tuned out and they're all dead. Or they all got fired by Activision. Or maybe they're just too busy snorting cocaine. Or maybe I wasn't clear enough in my email where I linked his videos and said, look at these animations, linked them to Wowhead model and said, look at your animations. They're actually the same. Maybe they still don't actually have a legal ground to do anything with. So, yeah, the whole, you know, when you get into like the mods, trying to make money thing and ownership of assets and stuff like that, like...
Yeah, I mean, you guys all know I haven't set up a Patreon for Cosmonarchy Brood War. I wonder why that is. Is it because maybe it's not a fucking product that you should pay for because it's not a game? Like it's more of a game than most mods ever get to because it changes so many things that are fundamental, like resources and etc. But it's still not a game. I'm still not using all of our own code for running the back end. I'm still not using all of our own assets. I'm still not using, you know, like it's just not a game. Why would you pay money for that? Like,
well, this is why there was such a kerfluffle when Bethesda said, "Oh yeah, you can sell mods."
Yeah, horse armor.
Because so many of the people in Nexus were like, "No, we don't want anything to do with that." And they said, we don't want our assets to do anything to do with that. And many went to the extreme, like they're just pulling their stuff permanently off of the internet forever, and you can't get it anymore. And when I was building assets and mods for my run for Skyrim, I ran into a lot of that. So even in my viewpoint, I ran into instances where there was content I wanted to possess, and I either had to go through third-party archives or just give up on it because it wasn't available anymore. And like, you know, when you talk about like what were mods like back then, back then, you had, you know, the sort of like cultural formation where people were kind of just like aware that they were doing all this stuff and, you know, how it was legally gray and how, you know, you just kind of accepted that and worked in that. But today it's like you've got to be actually really aware of this because people are looking to steal your shit and resell it. And there is very, very little that you can do about it. Like if I release my Unreal project, it is 100% possible to reverse engineer every single thing out of it using UModel. Even if I search up encryption methods, it can be decrypted because no encryption is solid. And people can just take stuff out of it and then just sell it. Like, what am I going to do if somebody takes my shit and resells it? Am I going to legally challenge that? Like, what if there's someone in fucking, like, Ukraine or something? Like, Biden will put a bullet in my head before they let me legally challenge someone in Ukraine. And then I had to find a way to pay like Zelensky's fucking lawyers to represent me or go there. Like a lot of these people think that because they put their name on something and they copyright it, that is somehow enforceable in court as a modder. Well, it turns out it isn't, because you've actually got to go enforce it. And if somebody actually decides to say, haha, I'll take you to court over this, what are you going to do about it? Like, the actual legal framework is really hard to get into, especially in specific countries, as an individual. And to actually bring somebody to court over something this stupid is more expensive than you can possibly imagine. So what you're basically relying on, like, are they using a third-party distributor? Will the third-party distributor uphold this? Like, if I go to Steam and say, hey, this guy's selling my shit, can you do something about it? I don't know the process for that personally, but... you know, at the very least, you're going to prove that you created it and so on and so forth and all this other shit. And, you know, in a lot of cases, they can just jump to somewhere else and they can just keep selling it. Like, oh, yeah. Okay, you got Patreon, right? But you've also got a lot of sites that just freely distribute stuff off of Patreon. And you can't do much about that at all. Like, What are you gonna
No,
do?
people are
about
just
it?
recording Netflix with OBS and then uploading that. So
Well, you got when GameProg ate the bullet because of DreamHost being like, oh yeah, we're not actually unlimited. Someone's like, oh yeah, if you had the money, you can just use an Amazon shard.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but my content has politically incorrect commentary. Will Amazon care about that? And they link me to a European piracy website that's been up for like a decade or longer that just has fucking untold terabytes of wares on them. And it says, no, this is on an Amazon web shard. They don't care.
Yeah.
They don't give a shit, you know, unless it's like, I guess like CP or something. They'll get like the FBI involved. The FBI is not going to get involved over you putting fucking Microsoft software on this shit. So,
or in fact, insulting Ukraine, I guess.
Yeah. Like,
you know, you gave that example, and I was remembering yesterday on a stream, I was looking through some models, and I think it's on CG Trader. There's now a virtue signal that's also, as far as I can tell, a perverse incentive, where if you just say that you're from Ukraine, you get a Ukrainian flag over your model, and it's
oh yeah, that's what that is. Yeah,
and it's like, hey, this guy, this was made by somebody from Ukraine.
Yeah,
and so I blocked that, and I'm waiting for the Biden bullet. So.
The fucking virtue signaling is so stupid, especially from Westerners who have no fucking idea what's going on in that place at all.
It's just the new Black Lives Matter, bro.
Yeah,
it's like the same.
It really is.
It's just really stupid.
Speaking, you know, while we're talking about mods and stuff like that, something else that we can throw in here, throw the hat in. I don't know a lot about this because I haven't followed it intimately. I'm just being told offshoots of it. But Dwarf Fortress has released its Steam clients, which has, I don't know the name of the dude or how much he did for it, but he did at least like the tile set and I think maybe the user interface aspect of it. It has updates in it compared to the normal one. Now, Dwarf Fortress is normally free, obviously.
Right.
Now, I do believe that the dude who made it spent no trivial amount of money supporting BLM or some other domestic terrorist organization with donation money that was for his project, and that really killed like my whole opinion of that entire set of people. But until then, Dwarf Fortress was quite respectable. It was, you know, an individual working for free, and people would support it through donations. And, you know, they had like medical issues or something show up, and then people had to donate for that. You know, that's very acceptable, very, very believing. But a lot of people draw issue with this Steam release of this individual who obviously works for them and has, you know, like, I believe that has mouse support and a lot of other like quality of life stuff, because Dwarf Fortress does have quite a big entry barrier, which is mostly in the form of the user interface more so than the complexity of the game itself. And the Steam title tries to curb some of that. And there is apparently a lot of people who are butthurt about this. They're butthurt about this thing being sold, and they see it as a guy kind of like riding off the success of Dwarf Fortress and monetizing it. But at the same time, there's also a lot of people that are like, oh my god, it's Dwarf Fortress, I can spend money on it. So you'd like this even just on the window of something like that. It's just so... There's a lot of polarization on the aspect, on the topic of mods, for sure. There's a tremendous polarization. And it's not even like a mod. It's an independent game that was built by somebody that's now has a Steam version. And that divide has, like, even just like in the concept, a few people talking about it, I've noticed this massive, like even hostile divide between the opinions of people based on like this guy who has at least built like the sprites, maybe even done I don't know what extent he's done. I believe it was some portion of the user interface update, but at least the sprites. You know, a lot of people that are like outright hostile to him for doing this, even though it's been on Steam, you know, upcoming to be released for however long. Now they're going to start making a big fuss about it. And then a lot of people are like, oh my god, I can spend money. You know, you could have donated to the guy. All this other times, like when they had, you know, medical issues, you could have donated at any time.
Yeah.
But now that it's on Steam, now you're going to spend money on it? Like...
Yeah, because there's this weird disconnect for most people where they don't realize that they've already gotten the product that they would be paying for if they donated, because they already played the game and enjoyed it. Okay, you've got the product now. Don't like that interaction is, for whatever reason, really hard for most people to grasp. Where, like, on my own end, if I am fortunate enough to have the money to be able to spend on something like that, it's like oh, okay, well, this person who I followed for a long time, like watched a lot of their videos, or, you know, it might be somebody who released like a freeware software or whatever the fuck. Okay, well, I can throw some dollars or whatever, like, cool. And like, I view it as money changing hands, payment for services rendered or whatever the term is. Like,
Yeah.
but most people are, I guess, like, no, I need something immediately when at the point of purchase. And I mean, it is weird to get a product before you pay. Like, that is an inversion of what it normally is. So on the one hand, I kind of understand that people might be a little slow to adapt, but it's been like this for a long time. This has been an opportunity for a long time. But instead, it's like, I don't know. It's like either it has to be this recurring subscription like Patreon, or they just don't understand how it could possibly be a thing. Like, one-time donations are
Patreon
very
is
small.
so weird.
Yeah.
How does Patreon even manage to exist? It just befuddles the mind.
I'm really surprised
okay,
that they didn't make a bigger stink about it. Like, most people didn't just jump ship when they just started removing people for like off-platform stuff. It was that Sargon of Akkad stuff where he said some gamer words and on YouTube, and then they were like, "Oh, he's banned on Patreon." It's like,
yeah, they do that with everything now.
yeah.
You know, they've been doing that for like StarCraft 2 and forever, where somebody made a comment on something and he gets removed from everything. What was it, QXD or something like that? One of the early casters for StarCraft 2 said a gamer word at some point, and like every fucking organization and every platform blacklisted him because they got a virtue signal somehow. And I mean, that's very common today. Like, if you are on Twitch, if you're a Twitch streamer and you say something on Twitter or on YouTube, it can tank your entire fucking business just like that. Well, unless you've got connections like Rakita Law does. You know, unless he's got like a partner he can talk to. You know, his YouTube channel got nuked, and there was a big scare over that because that's his livelihood, and you know that's a huge channel. And you know, he can say one thing and it can tank the whole fucking service across everything, and he can get banned off of everything. Like
the lockstep, like enforcing of bans across across multiple sites is really fucking.
I think that people who lock themselves into that are fools to begin with, but you know. That's where when you get dependent on that, now you are playing by their rules, and the rules are fucking stupid as hell.
That's why you go to...
They make no sense.
What was it? I think I heard Alex Jones say you go to banned.video. I'm not going there myself, but you guys can check that out, I guess.
See, that's one... I really like Elon Musk taking over Twitter.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you can think about what you want about him. You can hate seeing a successful African-American. Or, you know, you love the fact that he's breaking that system, and there's nothing they can do about it. And the meltdowns are absolutely wondrous. And I don't give two shits about Elon Musk or what Twitter does or whatever. But, you know, what I give a shit about is the fact that I see the circle of content creation and how it is locked into all this social media shit these days.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a couple people that use Patreon that I don't use Patreon. I'll never use Patreon. I was considering opening a Patreon. But I think that the way they use Patreon is okay. Like, there's one individual that we have assets from that she has a Patreon open, and you can subscribe to her Patreon, and it's not really that much, but you get like a permanent 50% off all of her assets, and then you get a free asset every single month, which actually like pays for itself if you're going to regularly purchase this person's assets. If you support their Patreon, you're effectively going to get their entire library for like less than what it would have been if you even have bought it on sale normally. So that, in that sense, like that kind of makes that's all right. Like, I think if you really want to support this person, you want to go your way to do that, you are getting something back that is equivalent in your cost of content that already exists, right? But the way that it's typically used for, and anytime like a modder uses it, it's an instant blacklist. Like, that it is complete and total cancer, because these assets are something you make money with. This isn't mods. This is someone selling commercial assets with an extended commercial use license. You can put in any number of products you are selling on Steam. If you are a business or an individual selling your game on Steam, then this deal is actually worth it. You're actually paying less for assets to make your product with. But when it comes to a mod that never should have any money incentive with it to begin with, then you quickly tumble down the cancer path into a fucking free-for-all. So much of the Skyrim shit has Patreon links, like the first fucking thing you see on their page, and it's just like, no.
I've seen that
I'm
on
an individual
fucking...
looking to play a mod. Why would I give you money for something unless I already know this high quality independent project? This is a mod.
Yeah.
You didn't even make 90% of this shit. You had nothing to do with this. This is Bethesda's content. And maybe Bethesda licensed a whole bunch of middleware developers. It doesn't fucking matter. Your project just makes like units appear on the map at different times. That doesn't
Pay me.
it should never, like, money should never enter, like, and the thing is, what I hate the most about it is that that's the people that this attracts. That's the environment you created, that you allowed this, you permitted for this to happen. The developer doesn't step in and say, you should not be selling shit using our game as a platform to do this. They don't exercise their legal right to stamp out this incredibly cancerous behavior when they're in their full right to do so. Why would you let end users make money off of your game? Like that.
There was an interview that I recently listened to, and the subject of the interview said he had this line where he was like, I'm still, even though this has long since passed, I'm still a firm believer that something should be worth putting on the internet, or worth its place on the internet, or some line like that, where it's like there should be some baseline level of quality it hits so that it can justify like the web space or whatever, you know. And that was an interesting perspective to me, or a way to phrase it, because it's like, before you even enter into money changing hands, if you're going to put something out there and you're going to demand attention, it's sort of like, hey, this is worth just looking at or reading or engaging with in some way. Like it's a high enough quality to do that, because you could be doing so many things with your time. You have so much access to information. You can educate yourself. You can interact with people. You can do all these things to further your life or to further humanity or whatever the fuck. And you know, if you're going to choose to spend some time doing some leisure activity, it should be with something high quality, right? That's the positive elitism, is that you should be engaging with and supporting only high quality things.
This is why I hate aggregation websites like Nexus.
Yeah.
This is why
it's just
I've always
here's
been...
a fucking stopping ground. Yeah, just come here and put every junk that you've ever made.
Exactly. They don't uphold any standards whatsoever. Right. So to find something out, like before, back in, when the internet was young, and again, back when mods were young, campaign creations was something someone had to pay for. They had to pay for the web space.
Yeah.
And back then, a lot of these people weren't, like 30-year-olds getting paid out the ass to troll Twitter. There were people who actually had to work, which meant that if they were paying for this website, chances are they had a good reason to pay for this website, which meant that, if you were going to get on this website, typically you had to have merit to get on this website. Now, again, you can make the argument about the fact that all these campaigns were silly and they didn't really have much quality to them whatsoever. But campaign creations at one point did have a reputation for elitism by extent of, not just everybody could have their campaign on this website, which meant that at the time, to some extent, when you went to this website, you could have some guarantee that the content on the website was at least of a higher than average quality at the time, because only specific people were even allowed to post here to begin with.
Yes.
Now, that's just like a way of encapsulating the general experience of the internet back then, where if there was something on the internet other than obviously GeoCities and Tripod and all this shit had their reputations for being those free sites anybody could just vomit crap onto. Yeah. But it's nothing like today, where it's just like, if you want to find quality content on YouTube or whatever, you're going to be digging a long fucking time. And there are interesting channels on YouTube, and there are people who upload interesting stuff, and they're fucking hard as hell to find. It's just like back to like the search engines being absolute cancer. It's not just that the search engines are cancer. It's that so much of the shit on the internet is just noise and garbage. Yep. And that's just the problem. Like that, mods are like that too now. It's not just like the accessibility, but the fact that you can just vomit crap on the internet, and it creates a cluttered mess. And I have seen a lot of people with potential to make decent content get turned off because they just get lost in the noise. You have Ricky Hanajase, who is French. And
he does put things in bunkers. He
does put Reapers in bunkers. And man, how much time has he wasted boosting his maps in StarCraft 2 to try to get them to show up in the fucking list, because it's based on popularity. Yeah. So he has to sit in his maps for he just leave his computer on, just sitting in the map, try to boost it up so people could fucking see it.
Yeah.
Because it's based on popularity.
Yeah, discoverability is a huge issue with so much content across the mediums. But to your point, it's like, okay, there's this ocean of garbage. Let's have some curation. Let's be like, the campaign creations example, and actually say, here's not an aggregation of literally everything ever made. How about we do, I made this campaign listing and I was like trying to keep it up to date, and it's like, here's like a monolith fucking, monument, I guess.
I know a guy who made a campaign list.
Yeah, you do. And
it's in an Excel sheet on Google Documents.
We're getting there.
So, a very secure website, by the way.
So here's this monument to every fucking campaign ever made. I'm going to document it all, blah, blah, blah. What I realized as I started going through, even the high profile releases that had like etched their way into my brain, or that people were saying, hey, you should play this. Have you played this yet? They're all terrible. All the ones that you already know are terrible. And those are the ones that you somehow knew, or somebody somewhere knew. It wasn't just you did an RNG. Let me pick something out of a hat. Okay, let me try this. No, this is like what everybody says is the cream of the crop, and this is just abysmal. And why would anybody subject themselves to this? So no surprise that the website is, or my version of the listing is languished, because I realized, hey, there's actually not much value in aggregating everything ever made for something if most of it is garbage. And even Chris himself agrees, actually, with my take that most campaigns are garbage. Now, he might be a little bit less aggressive or more lenient or whatever, but the point I'm making is that aggregation purely based on whether or not it exists is clearly not a metric that you should be going by. And if you're going to be curating content or whatever, that's just an opportunity for you to do that as a game developer. You release your own game. It has a certain amount of content within it. Your assumption as somebody who's buying into that game is, hey, this content was worth playing. This content is worth presenting to a consumer. This is content that has been curated. Maybe you had a bunch of ideas that didn't make the cut. Maybe the developers had so many maps that they decided, oh, I'm going to retool that or edit that, or no, that's not good enough, or drop that, failed experiment that, whatever. And then, so what's left over is the curation of like, here's what we thought was good enough for you to play. And if you decide that you're also going to have a mod support editor push, everybody check out, you can make your own content, you're throwing a lot of that away. Yeah, you can bifurcate it and say, here's the arcade, and then here's like the actual content that's official, but it still coexists. It's still on the same platform. And there's an element to that where, like, if you're specifically saying that there's going to be a built-in marketplace / arcade portal where you can jump into whatever, that is very different than like any case that I can think of that would happen in a normal product. You wouldn't see like, whatever, somebody's custom song or whatever be featured next to the album that it samples from, or to use an earlier example or whatever. There's just not really a good analogy to even draw upon for what this would be. It's so foreign. And yet developers everywhere are repeatedly just saying, okay, I guess we'll have custom content, and we'll just, I guess, why not store it right next to everything else? And I guess for full disclosure, like, we're planning on supporting you making your own scenarios or whatever, because we want to be able to obviously do that ourselves and add more content post-launch and stuff. But like, in general, like, I don't think we're going to have this portal you can click on to go and find every map ever uploaded. There's probably custom game lobby browser or whatever, but like, yeah, sure. Let me upload this garbage to the official server and whatever. Like, that doesn't even make any sense. So I just don't think there's any value in aggregating everything, like you say. I think you do need to be choosy. You do need to curate. And if you play something that's custom and it actually is good, and you are the developer, so you can assess what's good because you've already got a track record of doing that with the content you've made yourself, maybe you do make a blog post about it on the website. Maybe you do curate that special somewhere, some place that's more easy to find, the increased discoverability or whatever. But you certainly don't just say, hey, here's everything. That just seems like such a stupid idea, especially now that the information age has burdened us with so much noise, as you described it. So I feel like that's definitely been done to death, and game developers will probably just not learn still. And they'll probably still have all this.
Elitism is very, very, very important. It is the only thing that we can depend upon to provide quality entertainment. And like you said, what time is worth being spent on quality.
Yeah.
And not spent shuffling through the trash. And for most of my time making content, I was a big proponent of developer tools and pushing for things to be soft coded and stuff like that for years and years and years. I was always about that. But, after seeing the evolution of what happens, I don't think the vast majority of developers are nearly responsible enough to handle that. And in every single case, it ends up that they push that out. It's ended for the worse. And I eventually just realized that, the people developing games, the people in these positions really just aren't gamers. And when they're not gamers, like how could they even possibly hope to foster a really productive custom content community? All the examples that I've been given in the time of 24 years now of dealing with custom content, I haven't seen anybody do this right. And I don't think they possess the capacity to do that right. And it's not like, oh, modders are becoming game developers, so they're going to do it right. No, that doesn't happen either. That is a dream. That is a foolish dream. It's not happening. Because many people who are in custom content got hired one way or another, and they just became soulless, trite mimes, NPCs, if you will, like the rest of them. And nothing they produced came out any well. What ends up happening is that the vast majority of people who really care about quality just refuse to enter that industry. There's a lot of people that I talk to. Yeah. Like, why would they? And if you can't answer these questions, then you just, you got to kind of lurk more and understand more about what actually goes into custom content, because actual custom content, it exists the way as it is because they're not a part of that circle. They're not a part of that awful. Like, the games industry is a fucking joke. It doesn't produce games, and it's not even much of an industry. It's a glorified money laundering scheme, and it is a cesspool top to bottom, and it just doesn't produce quality content. So why would you ever want any part of it? And the people producing quality custom content are going to keep sticking to what they're doing, and they're going to stay independent of that. And you're going to find that they stay away from the aggregation. They're going to stay away from the social media. They're going to stay away from all this cancer, because it is cancer. And it plays into the observation I had before, where a lot of the people making this kinds of stuff are not American. There are certainly American custom content developers producing decent content, but they are definitely the minority. And it all plays into culture and the expectations. Is a lot of the Westerners are, especially in the last 10, 15 years, they're all hopped up on the instant gratification thing. That's what they grew up with. That's what their education and their peers and everything is circulated and hammered into them through their life. And all that mods are today at large is just another form of instant gratification. In any way you view them, people think that it's just, oh, there's problems with the game, so modders will fix it. Or modders think, oh, a game came with mod support. I can make some money on Patreon. And, the end result of all of these equations is the end result is always a shitty product. So they're all cancer. And I would very much like to see them all just disappear.
I like the idea that now if you're hostile to mod support in some way, by doing going down the road that we were talking about, yeah, sure, soft code all this stuff so that modders can do it, and make these developer tools like you were saying. I mean, dude, remember Antikythera was initially going to be open source, and we were just going to distribute it everywhere. Now we realize, oh wait, the reason why we were pushing for all of this soft code and all of this open source stuff is actually because there was all these things we wanted to do that we couldn't do by modding, and so we had to make our own game. But also the reason why we were even driven to do this in the first place was mostly because the game was terrible to begin with and needed to be improved. And if you just make a product that's actually good, then maybe you won't have that urge to constantly re-engineer it. And also there's the added idea of maybe if you want the ability to do all of this stuff in an open source kind of way, you should have source control because you wrote the fucking engine or you wrote the game or whatever. There's all these things where it's you start to realize that maybe there was an element of a mixture of entitlement initially, but also that dissatisfaction with what's there is because what's there is not good, or it's not good enough at the very least. And so that's where I think, you do see that evolution in thought. And that's why we're not really that into it. We'll distribute it to some people who are, we have some confidence and can do the thing, but that's again, curating the people who are going to receive it. And we're not going to necessarily say, hey, yeah, just download the latest Git update or whatever. Nah, bro, we're giving it to you as is, and you can do with it what you will, that kind of thing. So that to me is a much more sensible way, because it forces you to then have the responsibility of providing a quality end result, a quality end product. And most people don't. And now if you're hostile to mod support, I can already imagine the stink pieces people are going to say, oh shit, bro, these guys don't want mod support. How dare they think they can make a good enough game? But what? Why is that? Now I just can already imagine people saying what, don't you want people to make their own game with your game? No, not really. I don't really give a shit. Why should I either? Why is that the responsibility? It just falls apart when you actually examine it at all. And most people just haven't.
Well, the thing is too, is that this isn't, 2001, 2002. Making games today is easier than it has ever been. It is the least expensive it has ever been. The information is out there. The resources are out there. It is very hard to justify the existence of mods today. It is hard to justify anybody putting in the time and the effort to figure out some convoluted piece of shit like Skyrim when we have Unreal, you have Unity, you have Godot, you have all these other engines out there that you can take your pick and you can do whatever you want with.
Yeah,
and you
can
sell it if you want to. The
complexity stack of the software is increasing because of like the general tools that are available, like Unreal, for example, right? The general tools available to you are now more complex, which means as a modder, you need to reverse engineer more things and figure out more things. And in some ways, in deference to the idea that maybe it can jumpstart your game design career or whatever, like there are enough things that were like a lot of these cases, yeah, you are learning skills that you might be able to easily map on to these environments, but you'd get there a lot faster if you just fucked up and did it, Like, yeah. The idea that you're just going to sit here and mod instead doesn't... It's getting harder to mod, but easier to make a game. Gee, I wonder which one you should be doing,
Absolutely. And the thing is that let's say the developers are honest and good-hearted, and they don't have any ulterior motives, and they really do just want to make mod support in their game to support people, and they feel like they're giving back or something. It takes away development time that is completely and totally unnecessary, and there's no guarantee it's actually going to add any longevity to their product whatsoever.
Yeah.
Modding is effectively dead for the most part, other than already established communities. And chances are, just because your product supports modding doesn't mean you're going to take away people from those communities. Just because you make World of Warcraft 2 doesn't mean you're going to take players away from World of Warcraft. It's the same thing. People are locked into titles like Skyrim and Doom for very good reasons. And you have to give them extraordinary reasons to even have them pay your product any kind of attention. A lot of these people who are looking at modern games for mod supports are basically projecting their desire for a better game onto that. Yes. And they know that the product is going to be shit, and they want the product to be better, but either they don't know how to word themselves properly, or they're just venting frustrations in their own way that this product is going to be subpar, and they know it's going to be subpar, and they hope that somebody will come along and fix it.
Yeah, there was a funny... Dr. Disrespect clip that I can't remember where I saw it, but somebody linked it, and the clip is just him, like he dies in Warzone or whatever Call of Duty game is out now, and he just goes, there's nothing to play! I want to play a game! There's nothing good to play! I want to have fun! Or something. Like, it's just like total meltdown, because there's literally nothing to play. Like, yeah, that's pretty much the current state of things, isn't it,
No.
So, like, that kind of wraps it up. In many ways. Neat little sunglass bow, because that's what he wears. He wears sunglasses inside for some reason.
Was he actually shot at, or was that just a publicity thing?
I didn't even know that was a thing at all, of any kind. So that's
I remember there being a clip of someone allegedly shooting at his house or drive-bying him or something, but I heard it might have been a publicity. So, honestly, that's the only thing I know about him.
Let's see.
I try not to follow any kind of streaming or internet personalities because I find them all to be extremely shallow and unconvincing.
People are just reporting on it as if it were true, so maybe it is. But also maybe it isn't, because LOL News and LOL Journalism.
Yeah, it's the problem. You can't really trust what you read these days.
Listen, one of the top results was Kotaku, so I'm just going to say maybe...
How is that site still alive? How do they make their money? Like, is this just all hate clicks? Don't people know that, like, uBlock exists these days?
I mean...
That archive.org exists these days?
There should be a plugin that just allows you to specifically forward to archive. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is a plugin, that browser plugin that says, for this domain, forward me to archive.org, wherever possible. Deny as many clicks as possible, please. Yeah, it's mental. It's like running, it's like sandboxing an app in a VM or something instead. You don't get the cooties. Like, yeah, don't let the Kotaku cooties on.
So that's kind of part of the problem too. Is like if you had the aspirations and the potential to get big with a certain product, and you're going the whole curation route, and you're really putting a lot of time into your presentation, you've got this cabal of shills and these marketers that are very much geared to keeping people like you down and out of the circulation. And that is Kotaku, IGN, all these other shill extensions, these marketing sites. in that you're going to get butt fucked by them, and people do get butt fucked by them when you try to play against, you know, their market. And you know, I always imagine, you know, there was a world in which I actually went like public with my projects, that I would just put these people on blast every single chance I got and use that as my marketing, because not enough people do that. So many people think that these websites, like the websites exist, and they still exist because there are still people stupid enough to go there and actually believe anything they say and, you know, go by their reviews or whatever. Like, people still use Metacritic as some kind of basis for quality, and it's just absolutely crazy. And you don't want to play that game. You get ousted by like inverse curation.
Yeah.
If you don't pay these people money, and it's like I fault the industry, and I fault the people, you know, releasing shitty products and doing stupid marketing and using social media, Patreon crap like that. But when you have to fight this cabal to be successful, if you want to make an actual honest product, is probably even significantly more difficult and more costly. And I think some people do that, but it's not very common.
I totally even forgot that. Like I wasn't even thinking about that. But when we release our games, we actually have like you're
gonna be fighting the cabal. That's right.
Theory,
like you are already a niche product.
Yeah.
And you're not in bed with all these show websites. Like, how are you gonna get like exposure? Is really gonna be through like word of mouth.
Yeah, I haven't even really thought about that. But like, you know, you can do a press kit where you just send it out to like all these automatic fucking like basically these online journals, and it's like.
Journals, quotations.
Yeah. And then like you could do that, and then that would be it. So you'd have your game and your like a review copy or whatever, and then that would be it. But I don't know, like at the same time, I certainly
like, do you really want anything to do with it?
I don't really want anything to do with most of these people. I was planning on just finding my own like list of people whose actual like games journalism in terms of like YouTube reviews, which is really silly that that's where you have to go to these days. But like those people were going to be the ones I target more, you know, streamers and people who I know, if you want to use the term influencer, like those people who are familiar with RTS games and also would be, you know, I have some personal connection with or are excited about the idea of a new game or something, you know. Mm-hmm. So those are the people that I would be hinting at towards or trying to get a copy of the game for. And then, you know, also ideally not having any money change hands, just saying, here's a copy of the game for free. Let me know what you think. And leaving it at that. Along with maybe some sort of like, I mean, they call it a press kit, but it would be something like, here's a basic idea what the game is. Here's a link to a trailer and so on.
Yeah.
And so like, that was probably like, that was just what I was going to do. I totally forgot that like even that web journals were even a thing. Like I totally forgot that websites like Kotaku were a thing.
Well, it's very easy to forget they exist because they really are just there. They're just ads. Yeah. That's literally what they are. They're just ads. They're just marketing firms. Yeah. Nobody really sensible pays any attention to them, right? They're catering to those people who are not gamers, so they don't care. They just want to be told what to like, so they'll just go to anything that reinforces that.
Well, and listen, when you mouse over the building tooltip for constructing a building and you see identify as town center, I think Kotaku's already going to start writing the hate pieces. I don't think they're going to need an invitation, so I think it might already be over, boys.
Yeah. I would love to see some of these sites go through some of my internal documentation.
Yeah, of course.
Because just the names, like in my comments and stuff, would get them going. They wouldn't even be able to publish the pieces; it'd be too controversial. They'd probably bury it and pretend it doesn't exist, kind of like, you know, like the Twitter files or whatever that Musk released that points out all the money exchanging and censoring, and you know, the news just pretends it doesn't exist.
There's some good reactions to that where it's like some guy who has a Substack, and they really hate the idea that you have a Substack, which is like kind of like Patreon for journalists, which I know sounds like the most cancer combination, but it's basically like you can read Like instead of them being paid at like one of these websites, they just go independent, and if you like their reportage, you can pay money on a monthly basis to support them. Which, you know, on its face, if they're actually being journalists and not what journalism has turned into, maybe that makes sense, right? And it's like a way for them to not be beholden to these giant companies that are clearly in bed with a bunch of other cases and interests. So in some sense, you might even say it makes sense. But the fact that like these people who are at the New York Times or whatever are like, fuck those Substack guys, they aren't even real journalists. Like, okay, bro, do you live in a fucking bubble? I mean, the answer is yes, but like, you guys have no idea how most people look at you. Fucking ivory tower nonsense.
Like the whole like that's the crowd that people who sell mods wants to be a part of. That's what they're climbing to be a part of. They want to get like, again, I like to always go back to my experiences with like Carbot and Pirate, where they were more interested in their Reddit posts than they were in the actual like real objective feedback. Like the like counter was their ultimate magnus opus, their ultimate reward.
Yeah,
for
a well thought out
paying
and
people to
well
work for
phrased
them or working on
comment
it
or whatever, like a review is not going to move the needle for them. They need to see 1,000 upvotes, bro. Like, you know,
and it's like, I just, man, it was so weird because, you know, for all my life I've just avoided these people like forever. But Pirate was a guy who like, I don't honestly remember too much. I think he helped me with something, or I don't know. It was easy stuff. I was helping with him with Carbot. It was like I needed money for cat drugs, so I had to to accept their begging, absolute just begging to save their project because their project was dead. And of course, they don't even credit either me or HKS to this day. And you know, the way that they treated it, like with Pirate, it was mostly his work, of course. He did a lot of his work. I just helped with odds and ends with like 3S Max and teaching him stuff and testing and ideas and things. But then, you know, it goes out and he watches Reddit for like half a day and then that's it. That's the project to him. He won like $10,000. I didn't see a dime from that. I'm pretty sure I didn't even ask him for any money from that, but it was like $10,000 was like, you know, that to me, like, it never was ever even about the money. It was about the updates. It was about just the fucking stimulus of seeing likes. And apparently, like, Reddit, like, hated him, and they just kept deleting his posts anytime they did get popular. I remember him complaining about that constantly, and I was like,
well, they used to have this policy where if if 9 out of your last 10 posts aren't something about completely unrelated to your work, then they just start removing your fucking posts.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he ever told me the reason why, but they would like get popular enough to like go into another subreddit or something, and they get instantly nuked. And like the update system is obviously just like circular jerking because it's not something that anybody knows that actually really puts stock in, except for the mentally deranged.
It's like the people who are in
Carbot
the bubble,
was like even worse because like Carbot would later complain on Twitter when like patches came out for StarCraft 2 and it like broke the project, and he's like, "Oh my god, I wish somebody would fix this." Like, dude, you have contacts for the people who fucking made it. Why don't you ask them? Why don't you break a deal with them? No, he wouldn't want to give them money for it. So
of course not.
He'd rather just complain on Twitter instead. I was told that by people who watch Twitter, and this is fucking hilarious. And like that, like it's just crazy to me because those were like the two biggest projects for StarCraft 2. Pirate was Dwarven Combat. It was like an arena, like kind of like not like League of Legends, but like a deathmatch League of Legends almost with completely different controls. It was a top-down arena thing with the directional attacks and stuff like that. It was kind of interesting. Of course, StarCraft 2's latency made it a mess, right?
Yeah.
And then of course, StarCraft was big because it was like the closest thing StarCraft 2 had ever had to a total conversion. And of course, it had like, you know, BlizzCon, everything.
Yeah.
But like to see the people heading these projects be so disconnected from them. And like Pirate was a guy who I didn't know him that well at all. He was probably the most, as far as I ever met, the most technically accomplished person who had accomplished the most technically competent stuff with StarCraft 2. But it was always like fighting balance, latency, and everything on top of it. But at the same time, he never like stuck to one thing. He was very, very flighty and never really like, you know, post support really wasn't a thing. And then I think he was one of the people who made one of those premium maps in the marketplace that show up, and it was something he had been talking about for a long time. The turn-based RPG thing, and when it finally came out, it was so soulless compared to what the early demos were. It was so soulless and so basic. It was obviously had just been rushed out compared to the demos and whatever I'd seen before. And it was nothing compared to like Dwarven Combat. And then he disappears.
Yeah.
And then, obviously StarCraft came out and then was instantly abandoned. They had planned post support and everything for a long time, and it was just instantly abandoned. And then they did the StarCraft 1 version. I don't know how that came to pass, but I couldn't even figure out how to even launch that for my StarCraft LP. I was going to do a run of that and talk about it. I couldn't even figure out how to launch it. Like, how do you even launch it? Like, I got that. They just gave me that. And I was like, how do you launch it? There's no, like, button to launch cartooned StarCraft.
No, you have to go into the settings and do it there and then restart the game, I think.
Oh, I looked everywhere for that, and I couldn't figure it out. And then I just gave up. It's like, this isn't even worth my time.
It's just another skin pack DLC, bro.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what it is. But it was like, it was really funny to see that just suddenly show up after whinging about the StarCraft 2 one being broken and then refusing to actually find anyone who could help. And then, just like how disconnected creators are from the content.
Yeah.
It was like, I mean, that was my personal experience with individuals, but it was something, of course, I've seen everywhere. Again, Skyrim and everything related. People are very disconnected with a lot of their stuff. For the most part, there is exceptions, like the ETAC people and their alcoholism, trying to hammer their way through Skyrim and bitching about it every step along the way. But getting into alcohol is a very common theme with everything related to games.
Sure is.
This is the people I know in Diablo 2 they start drinking. There's a guy who got into Diablo 3. As far as I know, he started getting into drinking. Obviously Mattson's just as ale hounds. Everybody starts drinking one way or another. Loller Skates got into alcohol because of me. Schwa got deeper into alcohol because of me. And Sonic and man.
And Sonic too. You have to add that part in, and Sonic, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Sonic would make anybody drink. I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, like man, why does it always end up like this? Because then you have the people that are just completely disconnected and they just couldn't give less of a shit.
Yeah.
And that's the modern. I mean, that's the people that are drawn and they're not gamers. Like they want to make a pet project and they want to just use the tools and make it happen. And then you release it and then, wow, look at me, I'm a game developer. And I mean, okay, I have a heavy bias because I'm somebody who's literally invested his entire fucking life into making stuff. So I'm always going to view non-engagement as a negative thing. But at the same time, it's like I don't vilify the process of wanting tools or wanting access to power or whatever.
Yeah.
What I vilify is the mindset that this fosters. I think that in any given thing, there exists the potential to make something worth the thing and worth the time. I mean, we were talking about AI, and I view AI just as just another tool. I've been using AI to upscale images forever, and my images are just shit I steal off the fucking internet. I'm using an AI to try to denoise them, to try to make them transparent and shit like that. And to me, it's just a tool, and a lot of people are like screaming and like, "Oh my god, it's the end of the world!" And it's like, I'm just like, it's another tool I'm going to use. If the tool gets more powerful, I'll be happy. So I can most certainly sympathize with the mindset of I want this game to have a tool set so I can make stuff with it. But I could sympathize with that back when I was looking for game tool sets, because I'm just looking for individual tools to make assets now. I firmly believe that modding has no reason to exist anymore. That the problem, if you will, the equation that modders would need to resolve, where I need an existing foundation to make my ideal project that's a spin-off of this or that, or modified off of this or that. I firmly believe that that's been solved now, because now you have the engines and the resources to do that, and you need significantly less skills to get into that and to come up with skill sets, your own personal skill sets that will last you so much longer than they would with modding. Modded games, again, 20 years was modding. I was doing StarCraft 2 stuff, even in 2019. Very, very little of what I learned from making mods assists me today in making a game. Very, very little. It's like what I learned in mangling images for D&D helps me mangle textures for Unreal. And then, you know, like the concepts I carried with me and the lessons I learned about what works in gameplay and doesn't. But that's more like superficial stuff I could have learned anywhere, really, as making games, as opposed to making mods. Mods didn't prepare me whatsoever. You learn hyper-specialized tools. You learn bad practices. You learn dealing with bad practices.
Yeah.
You learn compensating for other people's fuck-ups, other people's mistakes, and whatever. You know, the other day when I was setting up the save system for my game, and I was dealing with the weather system, and I'm looking at it as like, I have to save the variable, save the state, figure out a way to restore this. And HKS is like, you know, there's just an interface function to do this. The author has something there that just reports a state, literally called save state for, or prepare state for saving, and it hands you a node you plug in for your variable, and that's it. And it's like, the developer made content for a game and knew that games have saves, and here's a function that you can just call to get everything you want in one easy step. And that to me was just so fucking baffling, because I'm used to dealing with mods where nothing is remotely sensible whatsoever. You're literally licking this shit out of the toilet bowl trying to find the corn cob, just trying to make anything work, and you're just so accustomed to everything being complete ass backwards and requiring excessive effort to get around that it was just, I didn't even know what to even think. Like, it was just completely caught off guard and bamboozled that somebody had thought ahead. His system doesn't have an existing save mechanism, but he has support for one, just like that. And it's so simple, so stupid. But as a modder, I'm so accustomed to the simple and the stupid being impossible in every individual game I have worked with, and I've worked with dozens.
It's the default assumption that the skills that you're learning are somehow going to translate, but it never ends up being that way, as you're saying, you know?
I mean, not less. It's like some skills you can learn for external software. Like in your case, you're working with Blender to render assets. When you get into making your game, now you're coming in there with some skills with Blender.
Yeah, we just changed some of the post-processing stuff so it's not like indexing it or whatever, and then, you know, it's pretty much ready to go. We have to decouple the player color to a different way. But yeah, like, it's a lot of the same stuff. You can use the same animations and the same model and, you know, same materials. You have even more material freedom because you're not restricted by a palette. So there's loads of crossover there, but that's because I'm actually using a tool that will be cross, you know, it's not like using PyDat or editing iScript. Like, if anything, iScript has made me, which is the animation code for Brood War for people who don't know, iScript has made me feel like, yeah, there should be, like, the default is that, okay, how do I make it so that there's a scripting thing for graphics? But it's like, you don't necessarily, like, that's the default assumption. It's not necessarily true. You shouldn't necessarily have graphics require a scripting language. Maybe you define animation steps or something, but like, if there's going to be an attack delay or something, then maybe that should be defined in the weapon data instead of in the animation. Maybe the animation shouldn't have any interface with the gameplay itself at all. Like, it's just, you know, holdovers from that design that are now, they might even do the opposite. Like you said, they might teach you bad habits or put you into mind states that don't necessarily end up being conducive to an actual game design environment, game development environment. It's just not.
In my case, I was working with all proprietary formats.
Yep.
So like with StarCraft 2, everything I learned with 3ds Max and StarCraft 2, I can't apply that to a game, because Blizzard's own way of doing stuff is totally illogical and silly, but it's also proprietary. The particle system is proprietary. The plugins and everything I worked with, that's proprietary. That's their shit. Years I spent mastering particle effects in Sins and StarCraft 2, it prepared me in a mental sense where I know where I want to get, but when I walk into an actual game engine, and I mean, Unreal is very, very lenient, because a lot of game engines, your particle systems aren't nearly as advanced or as user-friendly as this is, as incomplete as Niagara is. I have to relearn everything from the ground up. So when we get into this Apex demo in a week or two, and we talk about the particles, it's like, yeah, I have crazy amounts of experience making particle effects in other games, but that's other games. That's proprietary software. It has nothing to do with an actual game engine that's actually open, that has access to the source level, and the low level particles have access to code and stuff like that. There are ways to do things in here I can't even begin to fathom despite my years of experience, because mods didn't prepare me whatsoever, and particles are a very simple and very cross-examinable system that's very similar across every game you can really get into, but it is still just that much different. All the things I learned with audio changes completely. I'm doing my audio mixing a lot within Unreal right now, matching stuff together, doing stuff that I couldn't even begin to think to do in StarCraft 2 or Warcraft 3 or Sins or whatever. The way that you do AI is just totally different. It just it literally is an entirely different world. I worked with StarCraft AI for decades. Just useless information, useless. Shaders is another big one. In StarCraft 2, custom shaders required editing text files and were very, very limited. And the stuff you're dealing with the models, extraordinarily limited. You walk into Unreal, I approach this, of course, with StarCraft 2 mindset. Went from StarCraft 2 into Apex X. You have to rethink the entire way you even view graphics, because the power that you were given completely changes how you would approach any given problem. Completely changes. And then all the things you were doing, all the workarounds and other stuff, just you can't even think about it anymore. You have to rewire the way you think. You've actually set yourself back in many respects. I've gone between so many different engines, I'm used to having to rewire the way I think. But at some point in Unreal, I have to accept that I don't know fucking anything at all. I've been working with games for 24 years. I don't fucking know anything at all. I have to work completely from scratch in so many ways. I have done more with modding than vast majority of people will ever live to, and it does not prepare you for game development. It's not a gateway. The only real permeable things you can learn is specific tools like Substance Designer and Maya and Blender to an extent. And obviously, if you got into reverse engineering and programming, that's a very good skill to have. But programming is one of those things where you will pick up bad habits for sure, and you have to relearn the ways to do them. And you
even
have to
reverse
be so very mindful
engineering,
of
what are you going to be reverse engineering? Your own code that you have full source for? Like, if you wrote it properly, you don't need to do that. So that's another thing.
The most of what you're really going to get out of it is knowing what your code compiles into.
Yep.
Which is very important, but most people don't even go for that, especially in a mod.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't think that's even important.
No. The whole idea of object-oriented programming is, in a sense, is to not care or care less about what the machine is doing and care more about what you are trying to accomplish. But obviously performance is like one of the first things you axe at that point. You leave on the cutting room floor at that point. So, yeah, I think some of the takeaways from this episode have definitely been that it's overrated to think that custom content's going to save your game to begin with. We didn't really stress too much on that point, but the nut of it to me is just that you have so many factors that determine your success. Some of them are in your control in terms of the quality, not that that means anything in this industry, and some of them are completely out of your control unless you've got like big backing and you can pay all the marketers. But a lot of it is just like, okay, if your product is going to succeed, I don't think that custom content's really going to move the needle. Whether or not custom content allows you to extend your longevity of the project is another thing entirely, but you need some form of brand buy-in like Warcraft 3 or some form of quality like in
creators to
games. Yeah. And I don't think that doing the whole aggregation thing that we were talking about earlier is a great idea for many reasons, but for one of the main reasons being that it basically just advertises shit and advertises nothing but junk that you have to sift through, as you described it before. So, curate content, make it so that there's actual content in your game. Worry a little bit less about what other people are going to make with your game. The people who are really going to be driven to do it are going to make the tools necessary. If the tools don't exist, that is just time tested and time proven. And maybe at that point you could explore spending man hours investing into developing modding tools, right? It's like, okay, maybe if there's actual interest, we'll do that instead of, oh, let's just assume that it's going to be there. And on the consumer side and the modder side, it's like, you're not making something that's worth money. You're building stuff that's like 10% of a game, and you're going to charge me money, or going to try to charge me money, or try to, bait me into paying you on Patreon or whatever. It just doesn't even make sense. It's like, I just, that speaks to like the standards dipping even lower than what it is for the actual games themselves. It's like
I'm not going to fault people for wanting to support someone, if they enjoyed their content or whatever. I think that's great. But man, the trend today is to beg for money.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, look, I made a mod. Pay me money, or I won't make mods anymore. I've seen that too.
Yeah. It just gets to a point where it's slapstick. It's like, what is even happening?
It is.
Like, where's the actual content? We can't find it in the games. Certainly aren't going to find it in the mods, because most mods are less ambitious than the games they come from. It's like the number of projects that actually try to make meaningful changes over what content came before and succeed also in making a better experience. Just so few and far in between. And maybe something like that will equip you for building your own game. But that has to be the end game, right? Like, your destination has to be that you're actually going to be a game designer. You're actually going to be a game developer. And it's a lot more independent than you think. And it's not something where you're just... I certainly wouldn't look at somebody who's trying to, mod a game that I make and say, oh, they could be a good employee. Like, what, under what fucking world? Like, for what reason, It doesn't even really make sense. If they were going to
You'll be paying attention to the non-modding behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what is the behavior of somebody who actually makes a game?
What skills does he have outside of mods? Is
Yeah.
he a programmer? Is he a modeler? Yeah. Like, the mods don't mean anything. It's like, oh, great, you made something in some really specific set of tools that's unrelated to my product. Nobody sensible would hire under those conditions. Unless you are, the case might be like the developer, it's their tools and they want you to use their tools to make their game or something. Like, in a broader sense, Epic hires people to help them improve Unreal Engine, because they have made something with Unreal Engine. But with a game, it's much less rare, and it does come with a cost, because now they got to pay you. So it's just, when I was young, I had aspirations of becoming an epic game designer and making epic games because I'm a modder. And an experience, of course, taught me that this is just not actually a thing. It's not real. And yes, I know people that went into the games industry. One guy talked to a recruiter, and it almost certainly had nothing to do with his recolors for Warcraft. He surely had some talent that was wanted at the time. Maybe he was a programmer all this time, and I didn't know that. Well, maybe he was hired as a programmer. Maybe he had some other skill set that I wasn't familiar with. Maybe, with a lot of cases, it's just that you talk to the recruiter. That's more important than a lot of things. Like your interview, your job interview can mean a lot more than just what you had on your resume. So, it worked out for him. It worked out for Blizzard, I guess. And, that's obviously the case with a lot of people. You do have Andy Bonds, who did make those original tools that did get hired by Blizzard. And he was mentioned by name in StarCraft 2's AI. And StarCraft 2's AI is probably the worst AI I have ever seen in an entire game, period, start to finish, for performance and functionality. So, some legacies you just can't escape, but it's not something you should be aiming for. If you want to get into game design, there is no better time to do it than right now. The tools are there, the resources are there, the communities are there. There has never been a better time to get into game design now. If that's your goal, just don't even think about mods. You shouldn't be really thinking about mods anyways, because you're going to be spending more time getting into a mod than you are going to be just getting into something like Unreal or Unity. Whichever you want to get into, just take it. Right? Just take it.
Yeah.
You'll have the more freedom to do what you want on top of it.
Yes, yeah. To me, I think about it like...
justify modding today.
Yeah, it's just... The back end is like... in a very small sense, if you spend a very small amount of time fiddling with, content tools, maybe I can understand that. Okay, you're going to try and see if you like it. But at some point, you got to just say, okay, this is for me. I'm going to start doing it seriously.
If you're really serious about gateway into game design, you don't need a gateway. The gateway is gone. Like 20 years ago, I could kind of understand that. I want to make something in source because I want to know what it's like to make a game, but I can't afford a license to buy a game engine, or I don't have low-level programmers. Well, you just go on Epic's website, grab the source engine for Unreal Engine. It's literally right there for free. You can make a product with it and sell it in a week. That's what half the products on Steam are these days. So why not? It's right there. People would come to me to mods, like say, I want to make a mod today, and the first thing I'd say is, why the fuck would you make a mod? I don't like, and on the flip side, I don't think developers should be worried about, like, there used to be the big thing about mod and supporting mods and custom content. It used to be a thing a lot of people were all uppity about all back in like 2010, 2006, whatever, because mods, you know, custom content, Dota and stuff like that was, of course, the big heyday, and its success really grabbed a lot of attention for that. But the whole surrounding resources and everything related has changed so much since then. And anytime people talk about mod support today, I feel like they're just still trapped in that mindset from 15, 20 years ago, where this was something that people really actually genuinely wanted to see and could potentially make real things with. But today it's just like anybody who's really serious about this is not going to use it.
And I think maybe the ultimate final note is that people should actually be serious about whatever they are going to do. And so the idea,
if you're going to make a mod or a game,
yeah. So be serious, you know, don't try to make it, you know, make it so that it actually justifies its place on the internet. I know most things don't justify their place at all, but don't contribute to the problem, right?
Don't even worry about the internet until you have something worth posting on it.
There you go. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if there's any more final thoughts to even be had, but this has been an episode that is, you know, on a subject that is obviously near and dear to us both, and I think bothers us both quite a bit, and just especially me. I'm getting so tired of seeing this like rolled out in the sort of circus wagon of here's why our game is going to be great, and it's got nothing to do with our fucking game. Like, why do I care then? You know, like, what? Make me care about your product and not about what somebody else might do with your product after you release it. Like, that obviously doesn't compute. So that's really just been irritating me. And
in my case, it's like I've seen so many people with possible aspirations and skills just disappear over the years. And, you know, now today I'm working so hard to try to make this piece of shit demo. And it's like, I think, where the fuck has everyone gone in my life that used to be a part of building content? Where did their dreams go? They're not doing this anymore. They're not a part of this anymore. Either they're slurped up into some faceless conglomerate and they're a nobody, like the people at Blizzard, or they just gave up on the entire thing entirely. And these were people who used to walk in some part the same path that I did. Now they're all gone. Like, it's just like you and like HKS and then like the guys from Diablo 2, and then that's kind of it. Like, everybody else has just disappeared in my life. I don't like pretty much everybody at CC that used to be a part of it. They've been long gone from content creation for decades. You know, maybe like RCX is like the exception, but I don't really know him. And like, you know, you can say what you want about RCX, but he is still to some extent invested in and works on this stuff, and he's just one amongst like a million. He's just a standout to me. And I look at like the mods and everything related, and it's like so wish I had the skills and abilities that these people had that they did absolutely nothing notable with at all. And I'm still smashing. I'm still putting in the work. Mm-hmm. And I just, you know, it's a lonely process in many ways, because now all these people that, you know, I talked about dreams and projects and stuff way gone. They're just, some of them are even dead probably.
Or effectively as much based on how long it's been, right?
Well, the guy that I, when I was very young, that I viewed as like an inspiration, he shot himself years ago. And yeah, it's just, you know, it's a lonely road, but here we are, and I'll just keep smashing. And it's like, well, you know, most of these people, you know, we talked about it in one of the last Big Boys tables. I just can't fathom what it's like to live without that kind of a mindset, without aspirations, without dreams, without seeing things when you close your eyes, and without living in your own worlds and stuff like that. And it's just like these people just became faceless, nothing, NPCs, if you will. And it's just, they just all faded to gray and disappeared. And it's hard to remember those days and be like, yeah, I lived that life. I talked to lots of people way back, and now I talk to nobody because there's nobody left. And yet the power to do whatever they wanted to do, like the people who talked about the Half-Life 2 projects, the power to make that come to life has never been more present. It's never been easier to get into that. And
the standards have never been lower.
Yeah, the standards have never been lower.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, how far things have fallen, but at the same time, that to me just kind of reinforces my own pressure to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's this idea of like
solidify what I believe in.
It's like an abundance mindset versus a famine mindset. And if you have the abundance mindset, which is I'm going to be somebody who succeeds, I'm going to be, if there's 1 out of 100 people make it, I'm going to be the one, that kind of like confidence that you can have in yourself. It gets easier to do in this stage where everybody is shoveling out shit. It's like, okay, if all I have to do is do like the baseline, like my C game is like significantly better than these people's A game in terms of performance. If we're rating like ABC, like my fucking baseline is significantly higher than everybody else's. Then all I have to do is like sort of kind of moderately competently market the game and get people to know that it exists. Basically, that's all I have to do. And then it will instantly be a fucking hit. Like that kind of angle, or, you know, in your case, you're not even thinking about that. You're just thinking all I have to do. I mean, you're obviously putting a lot of effort into it, but it's also like, I don't have all of these skills. I don't have all of these, like all this history, but I can still produce something that's going to put like AAA releases down the years to shame. And it's like, yeah, you know, a couple dudes, a couple guys can do that, like you and HKS and the people who are in your circle, and then myself and the people on the team, like Veek and et cetera. Like, yeah, we can do that. Like, it's not actually, like, it's not easy necessarily. It's not like you just walk in the park, but if you just keep smashing, as you said, if you just keep doing the work, then the work gets done and you're done. Like, you got your thing. And it's just, yeah, the barrier of entry being so low obviously means that there's a lot of shit, but it also means it's very easy for you to just do whatever it is you wanted to do, and you can suddenly achieve way more than you ever thought possible. So, yeah, yet another thing where it's like, why bother mod? Just go make your thing, kind of deal.
Yeah, I see myself as a last man standing.
There you go.
My whole everything, like the whole history I have is just gone. All the people are gone. All the sites are basically gone. The culture community is long gone. Everything is long gone. It's just me. I'm the last man standing, and I'm just gonna keep smashing till I can smash no more.
Well, smash forever, IMO, and we're only 6 episodes away now from that 69th. So let's keep going, bro. Thank you for joining.
And then our next episode, we might have something a little meaty.
A little different. Yeah, there might be an extra big table next time, I guess.
Depends on when we run it and when I do my release, I guess.
Yeah. So fingers crossed, you might actually see some content after all. So looking forward to that. And it's not custom content, it's actual content, if you can believe it.
No.
So, looking forward to seeing all that shit. And I guess we'll see y'all later on. Is this the time where you say smoke weed?
Smoke weed! Every day!